Good evening and welcome to the Bellevue City Council meeting for Monday, September the 11th, 2017. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll be led by Troop Leader 231. If you could please rise and please remain standing for the invocation by Pastor Dan Wells, Chandler Acres Baptist Church, 7505 Chandler Acres Drive.
Scout salute. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2.
If we might take a moment of silence to remember those on this date, 9/11/2001. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege of being able to govern ourselves. We thank you, Father, for those who are willing to serve in such manner. And Father, we pray for these as they begin to work with council and those in administration, that each and every one would be given wisdom beyond their own measure, that you would guide and direct them. And Father, we thank you for loving us in spite of us, and that you would bless this and honor this day for each and every one who is here today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Wells, and thank you, Troop 231. Second item on the agenda is roll call. Sabrina, please.
Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Shannon.
Here.
Mr. Preister.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Mr. Modry.
Here.
Item 2A, this meeting will be conducted according to the Open Meetings Act, posted in the entry to the council chamber. Item 3, approval of agenda, consent agenda, minutes, and advisory committee reports.
Item A is the approval of the agenda. And we would ask that the agenda be amended on item, well, where'd it go? Item number 5D, to include authorizing the mayor to sign the certificate that will be discussed this evening.
Mr. Modry.
I move that we approve the agenda with the amendment to item 5D.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Shannon. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
The consent agenda is item B. The following items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion unless a City Council member or a citizen so requests, in which case it will be removed from consent status and placed in its normal sequence on the agenda. Sub-item 1 is the approval of the minutes of the August 28, 2017 meeting of the City Council. Item 2, acknowledge the receipt of the minutes of the August 24, 2017 meeting of the Planning Commission. Item 3, approval of claims. Item 4, approval of applications for waivers of hunting regulations. Item 5, approval of a settlement and release and authorizing the mayor to sign. Item 6, approval of the reappointments of Dan Downs, alternate, Tom Yeoman, and Thomas Kimball to serve 5-year terms until July 2022 on the Building Board of Review. And item 7, approval of the reappointment of Eric Ritz and the appointment of Tara Baumgartner to serve 3-year terms until August 2020 on the Planning Commission. Mayor, members of the City Council, are there any of these items you'd have removed from consent status?
Mr. Shannon.
Just a comment on the claims. There is a claim listing purchase of,
You have to remove it if you want to discuss it.
I just want to comment on it before we vote. There is a claim,
Okay.
I'm not gonna debate it, yeah. There is a claim for purchase of wood mulch. That is not correct. We're not purchasing wood mulch. We just had all the trees we needed to turn into mulch. So we are certainly not buying wood mulch, okay? This is playground mulch. So the bill is proper, should be approved, but any member of the public that saw this and thinks we're buying wood mulch, we are not.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Are there any other? Mr. Burns?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Not the consent agenda, the agenda. Mr. Preister, did you second? Mr. Preister, second. Questions, discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item 4 is approval of claims, which you just did as part of the consent agenda. Item 5, special presentations. Sub-item A is a proclamation designating September 17 through 23, 2017 as Constitution Week in Bellevue.
Thank you. Mr. Modry is, someone, do you want to, let's go ahead and step down then, do this.
Okay, all right.
We'll come down there. This proclamation is for Constitution Week. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in the republic dedicated to rule by law. And whereas September 17, 2017 marks the 230th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to the magnificent document and its memorable anniversary to the patriotic celebration which all commemorate it. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17 through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore I, Rita Sanders, along with the council, Mayor of City of Bellevue, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And I will give you this, and we'll take a picture. Jim, you want to come in and we'll get a photo?
Mayor, to fellow citizens, city council members, I want to thank you for this proclamation. It's important. My research on the Constitution's been going on for some time. And to get into the Constitution, you have to get into our history of our country, which is quite fabulous, and how we came to this decision. And we see countries throughout the world still struggling to organize themselves for success. Even in the European Union, they continue to struggle for success. Our first struggle was over commerce. Okay. Our first struggle was over commerce. And I teach international logistics at Bellevue University, and we still struggle over that throughout the world. Now, in some of the research, and I don't have the quote from tonight, but it's basically all our duties. As a retired Air Force officer of 25 years, I swore an oath, many of our members in uniform with the fire department on Patriots' Day continue to serve selflessly. So it's a great day. But the quote, or paraphrase this quote, it's all of our duties. It's not just a member of uniforms, it's all of our duties. to support and defend the Constitution. And from Calvin Coolidge, the Constitution is the sole source and guarantee of national freedom. That's our founding document. It's held for over 240 years. And Coolidge went on to say in 1924, to live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race. So I'm very proud to be here. I thank Councilman Modry, Rita Sanders for the help, and the City Council for making this proclamation.
Can you sign in real quick for me?
Say again? Yes, I can.
While he's signing in, I'll read the item B is a proclamation designating September 2017 as National Preparedness Month. Sound the alarm, save a life.
Is there someone here from the Red Cross? Awesome. I know we had a couple other people scheduled, but they've been since deployed to help out with the hurricanes.
Hurricane Irma, yes.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, and did you want to say a few words after? Okay. Whereas the city of Bellevue is vulnerable to disasters such as tornadoes, floods, earthquakes, and house fires. And whereas Bellevue remains largely unprepared for disasters and other life-threatening emergencies. Whereas experiences tells us preparing ahead of time by getting an emergency preparedness kit, making a plan, and being informed, people can better respond to, recover from, and lessen the physical, emotional, and financial impact of a disaster or other emergencies. Whereas the American Red Cross and the city of Bellevue want everyone to have confidence and peace of mind that comes with being prepared as part of the Sound the Alarm, Save a Life smoke alarm installation event. And whereas National Preparedness Month is a nationwide effort held each September to raise public awareness about the importance of preparing for all types of disasters and to encourage Americans to take action to prepare for disasters and emergencies in their homes, businesses, and schools. Now, therefore, I, Rita Sanders, along with the City Council, the City of Bellevue, do hereby proclaim September 2017 as National Preparedness Month. There you go, sir. Thank you. Thank you. We'll get a picture here. If you want to sign in and say a few words.
Sure. Thank you, everybody, really, and thank you to the City Council for having me in tonight. Our plans have changed a little bit. As you can imagine, we've had two very severe hurricanes strike the southeast and into Texas. So majority of our paid staff and majority of our volunteers are actually deployed serving throughout the state of Texas and now serving in the state of Florida. So what originally was going to be a home fire preparedness celebration taking place on the 24th of September here in Bellevue has now moved into this spring. So we will be continuing this educational process and celebrating with the City of Bellevue in partnership with our friends at the Fire Department in installing upwards of 700 smoke alarms throughout the City of Bellevue and throughout the Omaha metro area. So on behalf of the American Red Cross, I want to say thank you, Mary Sanders, and to the City Council for having us in tonight. And thank you to the people of Bellevue. We really appreciate all of your support.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Item C is a presentation on the sewer assessment status report.
Which way to
While Phil gets that ready, I want to say thanks for asking me here so that I could give you guys an overview of where we're at with the conditions assessment of the sanitary system. To give those that need an overview and a recap maybe of where we began and the reasoning behind this process. The last sewer rate study that we did, it became apparent that the city needed to update its sanitary master plan so that we could effectively plan rates and fund the department moving forward into the future. Part of that was identified as a gap analysis, identified that we needed to complete a conditions assessment of some of our infrastructure that hadn't been looked at for quite some time. So the council did approve us to move forward with contracting some of that out, and I will give you an update on where we're at and kind of a plan forward. This is a basic rendition of the scope of work that we have embarked on over this last year. We have moved forward to inspect over 1,800 sanitary manholes using a particular type of technology that's a 360 digital camera system. And we do utilize industry standard NASCO, MACP, and PACP types of inspections. So this is just an industry standard essentially that helps us to grade our infrastructure based on the condition of it. That is inclusive of GPS points. So part of what we also undertook in this was while we were looking at the sanitary system, we wanted to make sure it was mapped and located correctly throughout the city. We did also perform a triage acoustic monitoring using a sewer line rapid assessment tool, and we have completed approximately over 475,000 linear feet of sanitary main. I know that sounds like a lot, but when we start looking at these maps, you will realize that we have over 360 miles of main. So again, we've been working on it day in and day out with our contractor. So our crews, it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship between our internal crews and this contractor. So we are with the contractor every step of the way. We also capture pipeline information while we're out there, the size, type, flow direction, so that all of that data is put into a system. We also take a prioritization of each of the severities of these structures, so their condition. And again, kind of a basic baseline triage, and I'll get into that in a minute. The second part of this, and I'll talk about that, is a recommendation of repairs for manhole structures. So we are developing an asset repair and rehab program for our manholes in this. Okay. The next visual aids are part of the software program that we use, and I thought it pertinent to put this up so that you can get a really quick overview of kind of some of this, the lines here. It's easy to see the color coding. I thought that was easy to look at. You have a good condition, a fair condition, poor condition, and blocked. And each one of those definitions then expands into a NASCO pipeline inspection that we will perform. So this is, again, like the rough, this is where we need to focus. And we start with the next phase of this once we get this down. So it's kind of an interesting picture here, but we'll pick on South Bellevue because we did concentrate our efforts in South Bellevue to begin with. Kind of the Old Town area. I don't know, it's hard to see on an aerial view, but here you have Mission and some south of and north of Mission. Let's see. So the quick triage part of this helps us to isolate really problematic areas and start to begin intensive project scoping in those problem areas. This graphic on the left-hand side kind of has some blue outlines on there, and what I was hoping to represent in that is that it's not just a bunch of colors on a map. If you start to take an intelligent look at it, it's very easy to see that we have specific areas that are problematic that we want to address. So there are good things too. There's some northwest area here that we've completed as well, and so those green areas we feel pretty solid about, and so we're happy that we do have a decent amount of infrastructure in very good condition. So part of the remaining part of what we're going to be doing, and again, is comprehensively reviewing all of those manhole inspection reports and developing that rehab program. One of the pretenses for developing that rehab program is not only internal resourcing, but also budgeting purposes, of course. We will, like I said, perform pipeline repair and replacement scope. So now that we have kind of that triage, that first look at either the blocked, the poor, and the fair condition pipeline, what the next step that we have to do is actually internally scope that project. So is this a point spot repair? Is it a complete line replacement? Is this a candidate for trenchless technology, which is cured in place PVC? And there's a plethora of other types of technologies that we can use to rehab our pipeline. This is the next step. And so we have approximately 179,000 linear feet to do that inspection with. We do have a certified NASCO inspector on staff here at the city. And so that is scheduled to be performed internally. We will integrate all of this pipeline and manhole data, so not only the conditions assessment itself, but the actual GPS points like we discussed, and the attribute information into the city's owned asset management database, so that we can develop a preventative maintenance and, of course, those rehab projects out of that internal database. Part of this is also to prioritize those rehab projects, as I'll get into here in a minute. There's a lot of rehabilitation that needs to happen, so we really have to start to prioritize some of those pieces. We'll utilize that data to create that sewer master plan update like we discussed. I believe that there would probably be some straightforward questions about, now that we know some of the triage condition of our infrastructure, what are some estimated rehabilitation costs? So just some very brief figures. Like I said, the next phase in this is to actually perform that CCTV inspection that scopes those rehab projects. And I just wanted to point out that thus far, about 48% of the infrastructure in this particular phase is in need of further inspection and rehabilitation project scoping. To be concise, what's been completed around town is essentially South and East Bellevue and Northwest Bellevue. So the next phase of this project, I would consider that Central, North, and South Central. It's easier to delineate on a map, but we are not quite halfway through the city. At current productivity and staffing, this can be completed in just over 3 years for this particular part of the phase. Current year estimates for contracted pipeline repair based on pipeline size and depth. I wanted to give you a good range on what that is. It's approximately $70 to $130 per linear foot. This range really encompasses whether it's a particular size, whether it's trenchless, whether it's 5 foot to 12 feet deep, to sometimes we have a pipeline around town that's even 25 foot deep. This is only for the pipeline, and it doesn't include the manhole rehabilitation. So that can really give you a good, grasp on the magnitude of the costs that we're talking about here in terms of infrastructure rehabilitation. And I also wanted to give you a compare and contrast number to self-perform. Self-perform is just a vernacular that's used in the industry that basically says to insource a lot of this work. Those cost estimates can be performed in between $20 and $40 per linear foot. So there's quite a difference here on contracting everything out versus trying to handle some of this ourselves. I wanted to provide to you some examples of these asset inspection procedures and kind of the deliverables that we get out of here. One of the things that we liked about this, and this is a sole source company, they're really the only ones out here doing the sewer line rehabilitation assessment, coupled with this 360 panoramic view of the structures. This camera goes in essentially and creates a 3D model of the manholes, so that we can effectively take that information, not only store it in our database, but also develop a maintenance plan for that. And also, if we feel like it, of course, contract some of this work out. And it's easier for a contractor to look at this and really give us a good price. And it is very effective to have that data. One of the things, obviously, that we're looking at is inflow and infiltration. And just as inflow and infiltration is essentially water that gets into our system that we end up paying for that processing cost. And everybody knows that processing cost is a massive amount of the wastewater budget. So just kind of some examples on those areas where leaks get into our system. And, this is literally groundwater essentially that seeps in through these systems. Root intrusion. I did put these slides in here on the right-hand side. This is a technology that basically epoxies and coats the interior of these manholes so that we can help to resolve some of the infiltration and root intrusion issues. Just an example of the different types of technologies we can use. Part of this is also identifying areas where we've had offset frames and resets are needed. So sometimes it's not the barrel or the manhole structure below grade, but it is essentially that ring and cover that needs to be taken out and replaced, and we can do that topside. So that's in a synopsis, and we'll be working on this well into approximately the spring here with those final deliverables on this phase 1. And then I will come to council with that, and I would effectively be asking at that point in time to green light a phase 2 of this so we can essentially get the rest of the city taken care of. So that was really brief and a lot of information, but I'm open for questions.
Mr. Shannon.
So, if I understood, we need 3 more years to finish the assessment.
The assessment part that we're doing is basically a triage. The second part of that is to create a scope to rehabilitate those things. So whether or not it's, again, a point spot repair, maybe it's 6 feet into that pipeline, we're going to line it at that point, and then 10 feet in, we need to replace a particular section, and that is scoping it. So the full NASCO CCTV of that is pretty intense, and based on the internal resources that we have, approximately 3 years. I don't think it's facetious to say that we know that we're not 100% staffed at this point. So that's really what we've been able to, on a productivity scale, get to in terms of conditions assessment and scoping repairs.
And the $23 million to accomplish the repairs that we see so far is if we're outsourcing that, but you're saying if we hire the capabilities internally and do it ourselves, we can do it for half of that?
That's a substantial savings, yes.
Okay. And do you have an idea of what kind of people, what kind of availability?
Absolutely. I think at this point we need to look at what it means for us to have a system that defines what we feel capable of doing internally in terms of mitigating our risk and what we feel capable of contracting out. I feel like there is a level of risk that the city should defer to a contractor. Those would be probably the larger repairs, the deeper repairs, and the more complex type of repairs. There's certainly something that would be in our purview, I think, that we can handle with an internal crew. That crew to me does look like a crew that's dedicated just to those project site repairs.
And we've completed approximately 90 miles, and we have what, 3,000?
360.
360 miles?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot.
So, all right.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Ramos. I appreciate that you've taken this project on.
He's not picking up your mic.
Thank you. I appreciate that you've taken this project on because sewers are out of sight. We don't pay attention to them until they back up, and then we have a problem. I noticed a lot of red, tremendous amount of red, especially in the older parts of the city. And even though you said in northwest Bellevue, where I am, that it's mostly green, I appreciate that for me and my neighbors. However, it was in that section where we just had one of the most recent emergencies. We had 2 lift station pumps go bad, and it was only through the quick thinking of your staff that they caught those and no damage was actually done, correct?
That's correct. The lift stations, and just to clarify, I think Don makes a very straightforward point. This is of the collection system itself. So this is pipeline and manholes. Another obvious big component of our sanitary system is what's called our lift station network. We have 21 lift stations, and those are some of those are industrial level pumps that essentially move that sanitary throughout the city to the discharge location to the treatment plant. And in this study is not included that lift station those lift stations like Don had talked about. And those lift stations are aged everything from, 5 years old to some of them over 30 years old. So that's definitely part of this and needs to be looked at. And as we just experienced recently, like Don was alluding to, one lift station can be anywhere from $70,000 to $200,000, just one. So it's something that needs to be considered in terms of how we develop a sanitary master plan. I didn't mean to derail, but I thought that was a good point to make, that it's part of the
I
system.
appreciate the comment. I was getting to whether or not you have the resources for the upcoming year as we're doing the budget. And it sounds like the system assessment is still going to be going on for at least a part of this year. And then moving into phase 2 will be later this year. So maybe the 4 items that you have in the CIP are adequate, and the reserve that's there is adequate in the budget. I don't want people to get sewer backups. I want to make sure the resources are there. We catch them before they're emergencies, and we have to pay 2 or 3 times what we would normally pay.
The CIP does not include any of the scoped repairs that we need to put in. So that's the straightforward answer. Why? Because it's essentially not completed yet. I think that we are at a point where if we continue on the path to only look at conditions and don't begin repairs, by the time we get all of this underneath our belt, we may be behind the 8 ball already again. If you looked at the amount of linear footage that we've inspected and only just took 50% of that needs construction, and you took the best contractor in town, for instance, one that just completed a job for me, you're looking at over 2,000 man days of work just for that. So, dice that up by over the year and what weather would allow us to do and accomplish. This is a long process. So to straightforward answer, no, there is no dollars and cents in the CIP today that address projects that are within this conditions assessment. It is something that we need to look at, and how do we want to fund that? Again, there's a couple different models that we can look at. Do we insource some of this, outsource some of this? And that affects the cost, and of course affects where that cost ends up lying in it. Whether it's a capital improvement project or whether it's some type of an operations and maintenance program that we do internally. So there's the 2 pieces to that. In terms of anything else to fund the ongoing conditions assessment, there is nothing else in the budget today, or that you're seeing today.
Any recommendations?
I would think it would be prudent of us to look at least taking a step forward with increasing operations and maintenance to cover and that timeline, to shorten up that timeline for us. I think the finance department has done a great job with making sure that the budget is balanced. And so it would have to be a very difficult conversation to say where, in terms of operations and maintenance, should we put some of those costs if we do decide to, again, try to shorten up that cycle of looking at the condition, addressing the condition, because this is an ongoing thing. You don't want to do this every 10 years. You really want to stay on top of, okay, we've looked at it this year. If we didn't get it repaired, we need to look at it again next year because that condition will have worsened and it may reprioritize that pipeline for repair or replacement. So it's an ongoing cyclical thing that needs to happen with the infrastructure. I think we're in the right direction. It was definitely a lapse in, previously we were really kind of operating, if it breaks, we fix it. If it breaks, we fix it, very reactively. By doing this, there's a growth phase in saying it's not cost effective to mobilize every break. So if we say, hey, we know this is going to break within the next year, there's 100 linear feet here, it's a lot more cost effective for us to bite the bullet and take care of the 100 feet versus come out 3 different times for 3 different point spot repairs because of loss of service. That's the proactive part of, again, tightening that cycle. So I think, how we want to move forward, whether it's within this next rate study, which we can't complete until Omaha completes theirs. We can look at that, or whether it's this budget cycle, we can certainly look at that.
Good comments. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the dedicated work, because this was a massive project, and getting the scope set, and then getting the assessment, and getting the contractor, putting the RFP together, and then that's only phase one.
Yeah.
So it's not over yet, folks, and it's gonna be a big hit in the future, and at a time when we've got other things coming down the pike too. So, thank you.
Mr. Shannon?
As we looked at the colored maps that you put up, and thank you for that, that was most informative, doing it that way. The gray areas, the blockages, are these things that we're taking care of immediately?
Right, and some of those blockages are sags and capacity situation. So the type of acoustics that are used, if that pipeline is at capacity, which isn't even part of the discussion that we've been having here today, but if that pipeline is at capacity, or if it's sagging, so that area of the pipeline is essentially underwater, whereas in both sides of the other, it's not. It's basically an area of serious maintenance and contention. Those blockages areas happen, those white areas happen throughout the city, and today we are on a routine scheduled maintenance anywhere from 30 to 90 days, essentially flushing those lines. So we go out every 30 to 90 days and take care of all the problematic areas. And it's a mountain that just continues to grow. You know, as you're not addressing it, repairing it, that maintenance increases and increases and increases. So yes, essentially, as soon as the acoustics got done, we evaluated whether or not it was a true blockage, meaning loss of service. So loss of service is absolutely, it's getting taken care of right now, whether you like it or not. A blockage, again, in a lot of these areas, especially that we looked at, are capacity or sag areas where you can't even get an inspection piece of equipment through because the pipeline is full.
All right, and a final question, and this may be more Rich's than yours, but if we've completed 25% of the assessment and we're looking at $23 million in repairs, we can extrapolate that out to an $80 million problem. We need to start addressing this sooner than later. I mean, yeah, we can't push this down the road anymore. I mean, yeah, we need roads, we need libraries, we need a lot of other things, but if the toilets, you know, when you flush them, they don't go down, we're gonna hear about that.
Yeah, and that's why we focused in on the oldest part of Bellevue, where we knew the infrastructure was way past its useful life. And that's part of just prioritizing it. And like I said, to stay on top of it, we got to tighten up that cycle. I think we're always going to have work that needs to be completed because we're an aging city. And again, the level of productivity and the amount of funding that we have to address the issues, we will prioritize those lines. I do agree that that's part of setting this plan, and that's why we went out and proactively are trying to pinpoint it. Without having this triage done, we would have said start at point A and end at point B, and 5 years later finally knew at least that snapshot in time what we were looking at. So the triage allows us to basically complete what we could in 5 to more years in a very short amount of time and just pinpoint into those areas. So it's just a piggyback off of that. The triage is first, the scoping is next. And hopefully we can get that scoping done in an advantageous time frame and start to pick it apart and say, what can we finance in-house? How do we need to set rates effectively? What can we go bond if we need to? So it's not just improvement on areas that we need to address additional growth capacity, expanding our sewer system, but taking care of those oldest parts of Bellevue and infrastructure. And those are the most vulnerable areas.
And just to be clear, you do have the money to continue phase 2.
There's the money there, but just to be clear, we haven't put that into budget because that needs to be addressed. How that we would like to move forward with budget on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Thank you, Ms. Ramus. Very informative. Thank you for the update.
Item D is a presentation on proposed changes in housing inventory for Bellevue Housing Authority and authorizing the mayor to sign a certificate.
Mayor and council, thank you for having us tonight. We were here about a year ago, 15 months ago, and, I'm sorry?
Into the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Carolyn Pospisil, I'm the Executive Director for the Housing Authority. Jim Hawkins, our Board Chair, and LaShawn Miller is our Resident Commissioner. We were here May of 2016 and talked to you about a public housing change that we wanted to make. The Housing Authority owns 49 units of housing, both single-family and multifamily in the city. And we are asking HUD to let us out of our public housing contracts in exchange for Section 8 vouchers. The reason for that is we have reached a need of capital needs that far outweighs what HUD can afford to pay to fix the units. And we believe that we have a plan that can do that with some private funding and public funding that's outside of HUD's umbrella. We wouldn't have any families that are displaced because we wouldn't have any families that don't receive assistance anymore. In fact, they'll all receive vouchers. And in addition to that, we also believe that we can use that money that we would receive from the sale of some of these properties to improve not only what we have, but actually to multiply the housing that we have in place. On a conservative note, we can probably double what we have. On a more liberal note, we can do what some other housing authorities have done nationwide and do as much as 6 times of what we have. But we're going to go with conservative for now. There was some information in the agenda packet on what we had and where our properties were. There's a map that we provided that had pins of where the units are. And then on the information that we gave you in the point paper, we also talked about what units or where those homes were by ward. Mr. Shannon was nice enough to come to resident meeting that we had last week, and so we have presented this several times to our tenants, and we have their support where that's concerned. LaShawn is our resident commissioner, and therefore she represents our residents, and I believe that we can say, I know we can say we have the support of our tenants, that we believe that what we're doing is the best for them. Does anybody have any questions about anything that was in the packet that we gave you?
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and the information in the packet. It was helpful. I like the concept of selling the houses, the single-family houses, particularly to the residents who can qualify. I think that transition is good for them. It's good for the city. Everybody benefits, and having some support so they can keep doing that, I think, is equally important. I also like expanding the Section 8 vouchers. I'm just wondering why we don't do more of the vouchers and less building and let somebody else have the repairs, the maintenance, I've been somebody who's owned rental property, and I know some of the headaches.
Correct,
And
and you
so-
know that, and as a property owner and as homeowners for the majority of you, you know that single-family homes are very expensive to maintain. And we have 19 of those right now, and it just doesn't make sense for us to serve the families in those units. Like you said, we'll sell the units that we can to the people that are in them that qualify, and I have 5 or 6 families that would be true for. And then the additional of those 19, we will sell on the market in order to bring those in. I don't know that we're necessarily going to build. We've looked at building because that's what we've done before, and we know what works for that model. But as far as acquiring and doing some additional units, we would. As far as why we don't apply for more vouchers, the voucher number in Sarpy County is pretty solid as far as that's the most we're going to get. The vouchers that we're asking for now is strictly just for transition. There haven't been any other additional vouchers that have been awarded since the 1980s, and probably won't be just because that's HUD funding, government funding wise, it's not going to happen. The reason that we're looking to serve by building or doing more acquire and rehab, the reason we're looking at that direction is we believe that we can serve families without assistance. We can serve families without federal assistance. So we can do that more through a private model. We would still maintain those units, as you said, we'd still be the landlord for those, but I think we've got some ideas that we can make things expand faster than they would be otherwise.
Thank you for your answer. It was
Thanks.
thorough, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I read the material that's attached to our agenda, and a little bit of my concern is, do you think this is sustainable? To me, where a little bit of my worry is by selling properties, and then there's a pool of money that we can do a lot with. Is it something that we can still sustain 10, 20 years down the road?
What we've looked at is a full capital needs assessment was done in 2015 to determine what we needed for a 10-year model. And extending that back out, we need to what we have right now. We need about 500,000 every 10 years for what we want to keep. The stuff that we're going to sell beyond that, the costs are much higher. But I want to assure you that I don't want anybody to sit here 20 years from now and ask why the council let us do this and why we wanted to do it in the first place. So we won't make any decisions or make any action that we believe is going to be detrimental to the long-term health. The Housing Authority needs to be here. We're always going to need to serve low-income families in some model, and we believe we have better ideas on how to do that based on what other housing authorities have done so far.
Sure. I was just concerned about down the road. I mean, I didn't want it to be in a quick fix for some problems for the next 5 or 10 years. Where does it go beyond that? But you're the expert, you know. I don't have a lot of knowledge.
Not hired
on this.
experts to look at the capital needs. I'm not.
Well, you know what I mean?
But
We're
no,
gonna rely heavy on what you present and give to us.
Great, and I appreciate where you can do that for me.
In one thing, Jim Hawkins, I'm a commissioner. This is an application process, so it's not a done deal. We've got a lot of road to hoe with a very inexperienced field office in Omaha here. So we've got to learn at the same time. Learning curves will be very steep. We're the first housing authority in the state of Nebraska to do this, and not many in the entire region have done something like this. So but it's just patently obvious. There's some of you went to the ribbon cutting up on our properties up on 9th Street. We know we can do something like this, and we think we can increase our housing stock, i.e. help more folks out there by at least 30%, if not more. So this is a good deal from the federal level because they can't afford doing public housing anymore. HUD's has to get out of the business. So it's kind of fallen in our lap, and I think if we jump on this now, we'll be way ahead of everybody else. So time's right to do it.
Mr. Shannon.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned in attending your board meeting was that they are moving from a single-family house model to a fourplex model where it's much more efficient and much more cost-effective for them to maintain those and help people. And so that was good information to have. The other thing that I found interesting from the meeting was that the tenants that are in the houses that did not want to buy their own houses mostly did not want those houses because of sewer problems.
That was true for 2 in attendance, yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, the problems are combining.
Did LaShawn want to say anything? No. Well, I want to thank you. You're taking the lead on this in the state of Nebraska, and everyone's watching, so appreciate it.
And Mayor, your support by signature would be great. That'll be part of the application process, and without that, we couldn't do this. So thanks a lot for your
Thank you.
support.
On that note, Mr. Preister.
With what Mr. Hawkins said, should we have a motion to give the council vote on moving forward then? Then I will make that motion that we support this endeavor by our housing authority so they can have it for their application to HUD. And authorize the mayor to sign it.
And I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Shannon. Any discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Item number 6, liquor licenses. St. Mary's Church of Bellevue, application for a special designated liquor license during a trivia night being held at St. Mary's School, 903 West Mission Avenue, on October 20, 2017, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is William Westling. I'm here on behalf of St. Mary's School the Home and School Association of St. Mary's School. This will be our 5th annual trivia night, and we're looking forward to another entertaining and fun night. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Westling? See none, what I'll go ahead and open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this, please do so at this time.
I have one question for the applicant, and that is, what's the typical amount of money that you raise in one of these things when you do
Mr.
it?
Draper, could you state your name for the
So
record,
I'm sorry,
please?
Steve Draper, 9807 South 24th Street.
Thank you.
So before I make my comment, I want to know how much money they typically earn raised in one of those.
Mr. Cook.
Mr. Draper, I mean, I can't stop his question, but, you know, we get a lot of people that come in front of us for different events throughout the city, and I don't think we've ever questioned them, you know, how much money would be made. We approve permits for events all year long where they're raising money for
So
charity.
you don't want me to make a comment?
Well, I don't think if it's $5 or $5,000, I don't think that's any information that is needed, and I think it's I don't want to say it's proprietary, because that went, but I mean, are we asking the Eagles, when they just had an event this last weekend and they got a permit to have an outside event, did we ask them how much they made off that?
Okay, I can make my comment without that information. My
Yeah.
comment is that,
Because they may not make anything.
okay, my comment is that I've made the same comment in the past, is that I hate to see liquor in school-related event properties. I think it sends a bad signal to our students and children. And so reason I make that comment, and the reason I asked the question was, if someone were to come forward and be willing to donate to this organization that amount of money every year, would they be willing to not have this event? That's why I make the comment.
Mr. Cook.
And I would just ask that then you have that conversation with Mr. Westling, and I'm sure after this meeting, you pull out that checkbook and he'll take any money you have.
Okay. But I still think it sends a bad message for this body to stand up and say, we approve as a city council having liquor-related events on school property where students go. I think that's a bad precedent and bad message for this body to send to the community. And that's my comment.
Are there others? See none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion. We recommend approval to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission, the St. Mary's Church of Bellevue application for a special designated liquor license during a trivia night being held at St. Mary's School, 903 West Mission Avenue, on October 20th, 2017, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thomas. Mr. Burns, Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. This is trivia night, so on television, there's an advertisement for a certain heating and air conditioning company, and the lady is going berserk because it's so cold in here. Do you know what the temperature is on the thermostat when the camera shows it in the room and the setting she has it on?
Probably a comfortable 72 degrees.
It's 52 degrees in there and 74, and now you have a question for your trivia night.
Thank you very much.
So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Modry.
Yes, Mayor, I'll be abstaining from voting on this item for religious and personal reasons.
Any other comments or questions? See none, please vote.
5 yes votes, 1 abstention.
Thank you. Good luck with your event, Mr. Westman.
Thank you very much.
Item 7 is ordinances for adoption, third reading. Item A, ordinance number 3880, amending sections 2-203 and 2-205 of the Bellevue Municipal Code pertaining to the Code of Ethics and Conflict of Interest Policy for Bellevue city officials and employees.
Mr. Shannon.
After the packet went out, we received a letter from Frank Daly, the head of the Accountability and Disclosure Commission and the keeper of the statutes, if you will, for the state of Nebraska. And he weighed in on this issue, and basically what he's saying is that the state statutes, as they relate to the code of conduct, control the conduct of a elected official up until the point that they declare a conflict and then step down from the council. That the state statutes do not address the behavior of the elected official after that, because then they are acting as a private citizen. So the problem we ran into with our code of conduct, and our code of conduct is new, okay? It's only been around, I believe, 5 years, okay? So the incident that we ran into, what was it, July 24th? I think that was probably one of the first tests of the code of conduct. And when a city council member becomes a second-class citizen and is denied the right to attend a public meeting or address their elected officials, this became problematic. And this is why this was introduced, to try to clarify and add some clarity to our code of conduct and have it in such a way that it properly addresses what can and can't be done and what should and shouldn't be done. And so the part of the code of conduct that I proposed amending, 2-203, was merely adding the exact same clarification that Mr. Daly said, that this only applies to conduct in an official capacity. And so those phrases are added so that we have proper interpretation next time, and it's not attempting to assign that to the council member once they stand down and are acting as a private citizen. The section 2-205 change is merely stating that once you step down from the once you declare a conflict and step down from the council table, there is no reason to leave the room. You've left the official, table of the council people. You've declared your conflict. You're no longer acting in a official capacity. Now you're behaving as a private citizen. So the code of conduct goes too far in restricting and saying that that member has to leave the room and cannot participate as a private citizen, because that conduct is not regulated by the statute of the state. We are a Dillon's Rule state, all right? And in the absence of a statute giving us an authority, we don't have an authority. So we went too far. This makes a very simple correction to that so that this type of situation will not happen again. But I invite comment and discussion from all of you.
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you very much. I understand where Mr.
Can I just make one comment? Can we have a motion and a second to have this up on the table?
Okay.
Mr. Modry.
Yeah, so we can discuss it. I'll move, I guess it's
3880?
move to move ordinance 3880, I guess.
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Hanson.
All right, thank you very much. I understand Mr. Shannon's recommendations or what this change to this code. However, I really do believe that as a council person, no matter whether you declare yourself with no conflict, you can do that over and over and stand right up here and say, I'm representing myself on this issue. I'm not representing anybody else. The perception is you're always going to be a councilman. To give you an example of that, a week or two ago, I was asked to speak as president of the Offutt Advisory Council on the Sarpy County economic development of the economic outlook and on the Offutt Air Force Base and community relations. It was reported I was that, also reported I was in the city council. If you read the Bellevue Leader, there was a thing about how embarrassing, about the city of Bellevue, that I'm there only talking about Offutt Air Force Base and I said, well, it's on the agenda, it's printed that way. So by the perception, you are a councilman. And no matter what you say or do, it's going to be on air with all the folks watching around that, you are a councilman first, even though you declare that. So I understand that. So I'm against this amendment. I would like to keep it the same way it is.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I will add my 2 cents. Back in the 60s, I'm dating myself, a man by the name of Vince Packard wrote Hidden Persuaders. It was a book that was on the bestseller list. It was kind of unique at the time, talking about how people are persuaded, influenced, pressured to do things when they don't even realize that's happening. I think what Councilman Hanson said is a good example of that. The fact that you're a councilman, the fact that, and I want to get back to what our attorney said, Mr. Sullivan at the last meeting said, this is not about one person. This is not about one issue. This is about good policy. And I think to make good policy, although this situation brought it up and everything revolves around it, we've got to make good policy. And I think when you're in a room and not even in your seat, you're still influencing people. There are people that can look around and see he's here. They may want your vote in the future. They may want something else in the future. Those kinds of hidden persuaders, as they were called back when I read that book, can still be there. So it's still an influence in that regard. The other thing is, when we had the public hearing the last time, we had at least 3 citizens get up and they said, we need more regulation on disclosure, not less. So if we listen to the public, who is, and unfortunately, most of us who are politicians are lumped and painted with a broad brush of not being honest anyway. So when we have a personal conflict of interest, we just have to be even more disclosing, even more open. We can't really go too far. And I don't think this is a violation of anyone's personal or constitutional rights. Each elected official takes an oath of office before they're sworn in. That oath of office says, I'm going to put the public's well-being ahead of my own, is how I have always interpreted, whether it's in the military or in elective office. Therefore, I surrender some of my personal rights voluntarily so that the public can be better served and that I can avoid all appearances of a conflict where I'm personally gaining versus doing something in the public's interest. So I can't support this or the amendment that was being proposed for those reasons. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
I'm going to make a comment, and Tim Buckley in my office worked on most of this, and he may have some comments as well. But Frank Daly, the issue that we had concern with in the insertion of this language, both with Mr. Shannon's or Mr. Modry's, was the language of the statute says participating in, may not participate in, or vote on the issue. It didn't say may not participate as an official of the city or as a city council member. Mr. Daly, and I will tell you right now, I'll yield to Mr. Daly's opinion all day long. The man knows these rules inside and out. He said that he interprets that as participating once you've made your disclosure and removed yourself from the city council chair, that you're not participating in the sense of a city council person. I asked him for some authority on that, and he said, well, he goes, that's just been my interpretation. I don't believe we have any specific authority on that. And he goes, part of my thinking, or why I think we have it that way, is because particularly in such rural areas in Nebraska, you'll have 5 of your 6 council people own all the businesses in town, and if you got to buy lumber, you're going to have that issue because the guy that owns the lumber yard's also on the city council. So that was his thinking. Aside from that, the accountability and disclosure sets a minimum threshold as to what you can and cannot do, but it does not limit if you want to further restrict it. So the way it is currently written, in my opinion, and I believe Mr. Buckley's as well, is legal and permissible, and it creates another layer of ability, if you will, to remove the conflict. Even outside of the chamber's room, there's still a bit of a conflict in the mind of the skeptical anyway, because you're on the city council. It just adds one more layer. If you want to add that one more layer or maintain it, you certainly can do that. If you feel that it creates too much of a problem for you to operate as a city council, then you probably need to remove it.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Pat, I got sort of a couple questions. You know, Mr. Modry's changes, I think what he was trying to get to is that, you know, if there was a company, if there was a company, say, that was involved where someone else could speak for the benefit of the person, how does an individual property owner, how does he,
As long as the ordinance is on.
how does he talk for himself? And I'll give you an example. We talked a little bit in the hallway. If my garage was placard that this has got to be torn down or fixed up, and I don't do that, and I come here and I want to speak in front of the council, I'm the owner. You're saying I can't even do that. I'd have to go to a friend or pay someone to come and represent me. Would you agree with that?
I'm not saying you can't. Our code of conduct says you can't.
Okay. So my second question is, the proposals that we have today, Mr. Modry's, Mr. Shannon's, you're still of the opinion it's in conflict of the state ordinance and our state law and our city ordinance?
I am not saying it's in conflict, because I'll yield to Frank Daly's opinion. And Frank Daly's opinion is that once you've now announced it and you have removed yourself from the chambers, you as an individual can speak outside of some other restriction in our code that would not allow you to do so.
Give me an example.
Well, the exact example you just gave. If your garage, I think you had mentioned earlier garage being condemned, under Mr. Daly's interpretation of the accountability and disclosure rules, you'd be able to get up there and speak after you've disclosed it. Under our code of ethics, you could not. In other words, it's kind of that old rule that if you have two laws, the more restrictive law applies. Your code of conduct is more restrictive than the accountability and disclosure laws.
Okay, and I guess what I was getting at, and if I am interpreting Mr. Modry's write-up changes, that he was really trying to narrow it. If it was a corporation, you would have to bring the corporate, whatever you file down in Lincoln, and show who is part of that. That we are saying, we're going to make you prove that this is not a corporation versus just Paul Cook's rental house. But because if now I probably have a little bit more clarity, if I understand you, Mr. Daly is saying under that circumstances, Paul Cook should talk, but we've taken our ordinance and restricted it more and
That's
said Paul
correct.
Cook can't talk, but why wouldn't you allow me to talk? And I'll be honest with you, I don't want this to make an issue, but I believe Mr. Shannon's is a company. I went to the Secretary of State, and I would think it was listed as a company. I think, and I don't want to make this a person issue, but I think with Modry's changes, Mr. Shannon still would not have been able to talk on the issue that we had in front of the council a couple months ago, unless someone would say I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
So I would just add, I'm wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, in the case of Jim's changes, where he narrows it down to it being a business, I have sole control of that business. So there is no one else that could have talked. Basically, what Jim was trying to say is, if there's 2 or 3 owners, then one of the other owners should.
Let's have Jim say what he's going to say.
Okay.
No, well, let me just finish real quick. So I guess the bottom line, I'm just trying in my mind to say, if it's me and my family, my wife and I, and we would have a rental house or even our house, and I needed to come in front of this council to talk, I don't think I should be forced to ask my neighbor to go down and talk for me or to go and pay for an attorney to talk to me. I think I should be able to walk in here. I'll be honest with you, I think businesses is different. I guess I'll add to that I think a company that has businesses, I question if they should be the representative here. But I was trying to get to the point, I thought Modry's would get us to the point that in my example, I could come out and step up and talk and defend my position.
Mr. Modry.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of people are speaking for me here. That's fine. No, I was going to introduce an amendment, and I placed it before all of you. But in the amendment, it virtually...
Jim, why don't you go ahead and make a
Make the
motion to amend?
Okay. I move that we amend ordinance 3880.
As you've written.
Yeah, as I've laid out.
Yeah.
You
It's
should
it's
have
in
it.
front of you. Mhm. So Mr. Modry made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Shannon. Discussion. Mr. Modry.
Okay, thank you. What my amendment does is it basically everywhere that Councilman Shannon put in his or her official capacity, it struck out those words. And then it added a new paragraph C, and, and then renumbered the subsequent paragraphs. But a new paragraph C was added, which says, I'll read the prior paragraph, B. No city official or employee shall formally appear, I struck out in his or her official capacity, before the body of which the official or employee is a member while acting as an advocate for himself or any other person, group, or entity. And added a new paragraph C. However, a city official or employee may appear outside of his or her official capacity before the body of which the official or employee is a member while acting as an advocate for him or herself for a property or business that he or she provides evidence that the property or business is owned or controlled only by the member, his or her spouse, and or minor children. If the property or business interest has other owners or partners, the member shall not appear before the body, and it is expected that one or more of the other owners or partners would appear before the body. So I wanted to try and limit what Councilman Shannon had laid out before to, if that property or business is only owned by that individual or their spouse or minor children, because adult children could speak on behalf, that's the only condition in which they could appear outside of their official capacity to address the chambers.
And let me make a point of clarity, Mr. Modry, and I
Yes.
probably should have looked at this a little tighter before.
Okay.
But, and this is just by very virtue of example, this would not allow a council member who, in the immediate instance that we previously have, be able to represent Uncle John's Car Wash, because that property or business is held by an LLC. It's not held by those individuals.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't write this with regards to any particular situation or
Right, but I'm just
person.
going to say that's going to happen particularly a lot in business property.
Okay. So they would have to provide evidence, that them or their spouse or their minor children are the only owners or partners or whatever of that property or business. And then in 205C, where Councilman Shannon had made adjustments, I kind of added on behind what he had put in. I'll start with his. The council member does, however, retain his or her rights as a private citizen and may address the council from the podium, the same as any other citizen has the right to do, and then this is what I added. Provided that the council member has, 1, disclosed the conflict of interest in accordance with section 49, blah, 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 of the Nebraska Political Accountability and Disclosure Act, and 2, provided evidence that the property or business affected, I kind of mirror the words from before, is owned or controlled only by the council member, their spouse, or minor children. Further, to exercise this right, the council member must publicly state that he or she is not acting in their official capacity, but is exercising their right as a private citizen to speak on their own behalf. So again, I'm kind of trying to limit it to those those particular conditions where there was perhaps no one else that could speak for that member, you know, if he didn't have to go out and find somebody or hire somebody. So that
Mr.
was the
Hanson.
intent.
Thank you. Mr.
Thank
Hanson.
you. I just think that by all these amendments, it gets so complicated, trying to figure out who owns what and checking this on that. I mean, it just seems so simple that if I'm a councilman and I got something I'm gonna be doing on my property, then I should just have a conflict of interest and let the council go on its own without my input and without the representation that, or the perception that I'm sitting there as a councilman with, like I think Mr. Preister said, oh, maybe if I go for this, the councilman will help me with this, you know. So I just think the way that it is was just fine. I believe that these this code of conduct was adopted via the League of Municipalities, and it's pretty much standard, I believe, through a lot of the different. Boy, I got a yes and a no. I was shaking and a yes.
No, this was cobbled together by looking at other cities. They've got a giant file on this.
Who does?
This was mostly drafted by Assistant City Administrator Larry Burks, and he looked at about 6 or 7 different cities.
That's where I'm standing.
Are there any other discussion, questions? Mr. Cook?
I suppose I would ask, does that change the opinion of our legal on the recommendation that Mr. Modry just presented?
I don't think it does. My concern is it doesn't really address the concern that was the impetus for this change.
Mr. Shannon?
I'll make one more comment. With Frank Daly's opinion, okay, now on record, all right, the changes that I submitted to 2-203 are now moot. We don't need to add that because we have Frank Daly saying it, okay? So we won't have that misinterpretation again, all right?
Whoa. There's nothing that's been misinterpreted.
Okay. The only thing that is still applicable for what we were trying to change in here is removing from our code of conduct that the council member has to leave the council chambers. Okay? That exceeds the statutory authority. There is no statutory basis for making that happen. And if we did nothing more than remove that, that would satisfy me on this ordinance.
I need to clarify that because that's an incorrect statement as well. We have statutory authority to make our own rules of conduct amongst the city council. So we don't have to have specific statutory authority out of the accountability and disclosure to make it more restrictive. And there's nothing in there that prohibits it from being more restrictive.
Okay. Here's the basis of my comment. When a council member declares a conflict and steps down, all right, they move from being a elected official to being a private citizen. Our code of conduct can only control the elected official. Where you try to make someone leave the chambers, you're now trying to control a private citizen, and there is no authority for that.
Mr. Burns?
I didn't mean that in a rude way, but and I don't want to seem rude or anything, Councilmember Shannon. But you know, I agree with John. I think this is getting overcomplicated. And I agree with Don too, is because, you know, when you're in the room, one, it puts pressures on, it could put pressures potentially on any other council member to vote a specific way. The other thing is, you know, once an elected official, you're always an elected official. You know, when I leave to go home tonight, I'm still going to be a councilman. You know what I mean? I still have duties, and the truth is, I mean, we're held to higher standards. And I feel like, you know, by voting for this, I feel like it reduces our standards. And, you know, if you step down and start speaking at the podium, you're still a council member speaking to us, and you're still trying to persuade us, is what I think. And so I don't really agree with this, and I really don't want to change anything.
Are there any other questions? See none?
We're voting on the amendment.
And a vote to approve the amendment is yes A vote to deny the amendment is no. So if you want to keep things the way they are in the two sections cited, you vote no.
Please vote. And we're voting on the amendment currently.
Correct.
The vote is 4-2.
Thank you. Now we are voting on.
We are the ordinance as previously, without any amendment.
Leave it as it is?
No, leave, the new ordinance would be his ordinance.
Again, you'd vote no if you don't want to change.
Please vote.
The vote is 5-1.
Thank you. Item number 7B.
7B is ordinance number 3881, creation of the Firefighters Retirement Committee. Sub-item 1 is the approval of the appointments of the Firefighter Retirement Committee.
Mr. Burns.
I make a motion that we approve ordinance number 3881, creation of the Firefighters Retirement Committee. And then
Yep.
do I have to furthermore the approval of the
Do we
appointments?
vote on this separately?
We're gonna vote on all those separately.
Okay.
I need a second. Second by Mr. Preister. Discussion, questions. Mr. Shannon.
I move to amend the ordinance. Everyone's been handed a copy of the amendment to the ordinance. On the page, you also see the state statute 16-1034 and state statute 16-1035 and the requirements of those statutes. And basically what we've done is amended the ordinance so that it more properly reflects the choice that's stated in the statute, that we need to specify whether we're handing over specific functions or all functions to the Firefighters Retirement Committee. And that the Firefighters Retirement Committee would be responsible for general administration of the retirement system. The amendment states delegates all powers which are necessary for or appropriate to establishing, maintaining, managing, and administrating the retirement system, except for approval. All actions of the Retirement Committee would be sent to the council for approval still.
Mr. Mangiamelli.
The whole purpose of establishing the Firefighters Retirement Committee is to give them the control that they're currently provided under state statute. The change that has been mentioned would require every pension approval to come to the city council for review. That's not the way the statute intends that function to be. It intends that the firefighters will control that process. This is the way it is in every first-class city that has a fire department, metropolitan class city like Omaha and Lincoln. Those decisions do not come back to the city council. The city council would approve contracts, for example, whereby a new plan administrator was hired or something like that. But the day-to-day operations of the Firefighters Retirement Committee is supposed to be done by the committee and not require oversight by the council.
So we had an amendment, correct, and a motion?
Did we have a second on the
We did not have a second, I don't believe. See none? Mr. Preister.
Yeah, I wasn't going to second. I was just going to ask our legal counsel for doubting our good administrator, but if Mr. Sullivan has had a chance to look at this, I would welcome, or Mr. Buckley, comment. Mr. Buckley, if you would comment on the
Sure.
proposed
Yeah, I
amendment.
assisted in preparing this ordinance and the bylaws, and as Mr. Manginelli said, I think the main issue is the last sentence and the proposed change on 24-21, where the actions of the committee shall be sent to the council for approval. That is not a requirement under the statute. So, I mean, it's, again, if the city wants to make this more restrictive, they of course can, but that is not a requirement that all action of the committee be approved by the council.
Thank you.
So you would support this if we took out the last sentence?
I'm not supporting anything. I'm just stating
Okay.
legally what the issues are.
All right, and the reason I put that last sentence in there is it says the city council's responsible for the general administration of the retirement system. So statutorily, we're responsible for this. So if we don't want to have approval, if we want to delegate that approval, we certainly can do that, but we need to specify in the ordinance how much authority we're giving them. So this is where I drew the line in the amendment, but we can draw the line anywhere we want. But we need to specify what authority we're giving them, because the choice is in the statute.
I would just remind the council that there is a police officers' retirement committee, and none of these restrictions are placed on that system.
So we have a motion to the amendment. We do not have a second. Motion fails. So we're back to the original motion. Any further discussion? See none, please vote.
No, I have more.
Mr. Shannon.
We have an amendment to the bylaws as well. All of you have been handed the amendment to the bylaws. Basically, in the bylaws at number 1, whoever wrote this attempted to make it so that all the members had to be employees of the fire department, and that's not the statutory language. The statute says 4 of the members need to be fire department employees. The other 2 will be appointed by the council. So the amendment corrects that and makes it comply with the statute.
Tim, do you have any further comments on this?
I'm just trying to find the statute here, but what the statute says is 6 members shall be on the committee. 4 of them shall be chosen from the paid firefighters participating in the system, and I've got it up here. Thought I had it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So 4 firefighters are to be chosen from the active members participating in the system. 2 of them shall be designated by the city council, and the members who are not participants in the system shall have a general knowledge of retirement plans. There's no requirement that only 4 members can be selected from the participating firefighters. It just says who's going to be selecting them. So the firefighters select 4, the council members select 2. This was drafted to have, I believe it says all 6 shall be members except 1 who shall be a person who has knowledge of finance or retirement plans.
Mr. Modry.
And it also said that last one would be someone recommended by the firefighters, right? So.
And are you talking about the current?
The current.
Bylaws?
Yes, the current bylaws.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry, that's correct. The 5th one shall be, excuse me, the 6th.
Yeah. Do we have any background on this at all, or legislatively what they were trying to achieve? Why they didn't? The way our bylaws are written, you have 5 from from the active firefighters, and the 6th is also selected by them, so I don't know if they were trying to get away from that kind of thing specifically, or?
I don't know. I'd address those questions to Tim.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? I was just looking at this again.
Yeah, you know, the statute talks about 4 can be selected or from the active firefighters, and then the other 2 designated by city council. Was there a reason for that? Are we getting away from the purpose that they were trying to achieve by saying 5 of them from the active firefighters, and then they also select the 6th one? Do you know? Or?
I don't know for sure. Maybe Mr. Mangiamelli.
Mr. Mangiamelli would like to answer that question.
Sure. The language that is there, and I can see that the word all probably should more correctly be 4. So I can buy that. That's an acceptable change. What we wanted to do is, like in other communities, other systems, you want to have a citizen representative on the committee so that you do have that, and we provided a provision in there that it would be somebody with financial planning and retirement plan or labor negotiations experience who could be recommended by the firefighters and confirmed through the normal process of nomination and appointment. The other appointment in there would be the city administrator, as provided in the document that you have before you. The city administrator is currently the sponsor, the plan sponsor, and should therefore be a part of the committee. The change would take it to a non-voting. I don't think you want to do that, because I think you want to have, when even routine business is being conducted, I think you want to have somebody there who has the city's interest in making sure that the decisions and the recommendations are being considered. For example, when a firefighter who is on a defined benefit plan chooses to retire, they're required to get 3 estimates of what that annuity would be for them. We want to make sure that the city has input as to who those quotes are going to be provided from. Generally, what committees do in other communities is the city will have the normal plan, provide a quote. The firefighter would provide a quote, and then you can have a third quote. And you kind of look at those, and then the committee recommends perhaps an average of what those are, and you look at then what the firefighter has provided to the system and what it means as far as what additional funds are going to be committed to by the city for that. So again, I think the city representative has to be a voting member. Personally, whether it makes any difference to you or not, I have 20 years' experience in these kinds of issues. So it only made sense, since I'm already the plan sponsor, that I should also be a voting member on the committee.
Mr. Moultrie.
Yep. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. So the way it's written, the city administrator and the human resources manager would be additional members above the 6. Is that correct?
As ex officio members.
Yeah.
Right. But the city administrator should be a voting member.
That's fine. Okay.
Ex officio typically is also meaning non-voting. Right. Without having to say it, yeah.
Well, then we should change that. Yeah. So if we were going to change an amendment, again, the 4 makes sense. The human resources manager would be a non-voting member.
Or are we going to offer that as an amendment to the amendment?
Mr. Sullivan.
Well, I've got three different scenarios here, none of which seem to line up with any documents that we have here. So it seems to me that the 4 members, employees of the Bellevue Fire Department, because that's exactly what the statute says. The statute also says 2 designated by the city council. And it would seem to me that if the city council would want to appoint the city administrator, they certainly can do that. I don't know if you necessarily want that the city council is, what I want to say, almost by default through the bylaws appointing that person. So,
Pat, I'd just like to point out one thing as well. Mr. Shannon's amendment in the second sentence where it says 2 members shall be appointed by the city council both shall have general knowledge of retirement plans and 1 in general accounting and auditing background. That's not exactly how the statute reads. The statute reads that 2 members shall be delegated or designated by the city council, but any member who is not from the paid fire department shall have that background and experience in accounting and finance.
Right.
So this is going a little bit beyond the statute by saying both non-participating members shall have the financial background and experience, as well as appointing 2 members who are not members of the paid department. The statute would allow for really all 6 of them, but except for at least 1 who would have a background in finance and retirement plans.
Mr. Modry.
Yeah, I think saying that members shall be appointed, I'm not sure that's a good term, designated, like the statute says perhaps, but they can certainly designate another member of the fire department or 2 if they wanted.
Yes.
So it doesn't prohibit that.
I think perhaps what was done in Mr. Shannon's amendment comes to a line that says members who are not participants in such retirement system shall have a general knowledge of retirement plans. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't just mimic the statute.
And the committee has a requirement to file an audit report annually by December 31st of every year with the state. So having a person with accounting and auditing backgrounds would facilitate the success of the committee in completing that task. So that was the thought process in adding that as a suggestion that 1 person should have some auditing background to be able to prepare the audit.
Let me ask you this, because I want to make sure that we get this right. Can this be held for 2 weeks and we can get this cleaned up with these statutes?
There's no urgency.
Okay. I'd ask for somebody to do that because I think we need to address some of these issues in here.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the additional time so we do get it right. In doing that, I would just say we have long, or some of us have long tried to be consistent with different groups, and Mr. Mangiamelli brought up the police retirement. Mr. Mangiamelli brought up the police retirement, and I would like to, as best we can, make sure these are in sync, so we're treating both of them the same and not treating one group differently than the other. So the consistency as we're looking at an amendment, I think, is also important to look at.
Mr. Modry.
I would agree with that as long as there are no statutory differences that we have to take into account. So.
If we got it wrong last time, we don't want to get it wrong this time to be consistent.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Cook.
And also my thought would be is I know that included in what action we were going to take today was going to also put the members in place. And I don't know if the council is set to do that, if we want to have someone with an accounting and auditing type background. I know we did have a citizen with an outstanding HR background request to be put on it, and then I'm assuming Joe would say he would want to be put on it. So I don't know if by our next meeting are we going to be prepared or at least the city council to agree on their two people that they put on that as members.
I would hope you would be.
Okay?
Okay, so we
Your
have a
motion
motion
to
and a second.
Continue.
Do we have,
Do we need it? Mr. Preister?
Thank you, Mayor. Tim, who would normally do the submittal of the required auditing forms? Wouldn't an auditor or somebody be required other than somebody on this committee?
I believe so. I can now defer to Mr. Mangiamelli on that question as well. I mean, even though you have a member of the committee who has an experience and background in finance and retirement systems,
I would think their experience would be to look it over, to have some understanding of it, but I would think a professional or somebody else would make sure that it was done, but I'm not, that's why I'm asking the question.
well, the statutes do allow for the committee to hire professionals for that type of purpose.
Rich doesn't have anything else to do.
Yeah, but the committee is responsible for preparing an audit. You know, if they want to hire it, that's fine, but.
They may hire outside,
Right.
yes.
Right.
Mr. Severson, did you have something to add? Okay, thank you.
Just that you don't want it dumped on your plate.
We just need a motion to postpone for 2 weeks.
Are we ready to do that, Mr. Preister?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move to postpone this ordinance for 2 weeks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Modry. Do we need to give the date for September the 25th?
The next council meeting.
The next council meeting, September 25th. We have a motion, second discussion, questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item C is ordinance number 3882, amending sections 4-10 and 5-10 of the City of Bellevue subdivision regulations regarding approved final plat and small subdivision plat filing.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve ordinance number 3882.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Item D is ordinance number 3883, annual appropriations bill. Sub-item 1 is resolution number 2017-13, setting the property tax request for fiscal year 2017-2018. And item 2, approval of the fiscal year 2018 through fiscal year 2023 City of Bellevue Capital Improvement Plan.
I believe we have PowerPoint by Mr. Severson.
Should we have the motion?
Do we need a motion to have the presentation?
No, because we got to take public hearing first. What's that? Go ahead and present your budget, and then we'll do public hearing.
Well, you guys have enough on your plate on the agenda tonight. If you would just want to pass it, we'll move on.
We don't get to go home to this gets approved.
And Phil, I don't want to offend the anti-big screen people, so can you make it a little smaller?
Sure.
Like as usual. Okay, the budget proposed for the City of Bellevue by administration takes into account what the departments they were asked what they needed to fulfill their mission, and we looked at that and we made some adjustments to it. Just to go back, I think everybody knows who the mayor and city council is. The management team, these are the people that had input into the budget. For this budget, there are some, we say, key points. We're maintaining staffing and service levels without an increase in the property tax levy rate. That's going to remain at 61 cents per hundred. It funds the economic development plan, only 250,000 again this year. I know there's discussion on adding to that. However, to date, I don't think we've turned down any projects because of money. So it's okay to put more money in there, but I would really like to see some type of assurances and some commitments that projects will come. The city has already absorbed $750,000 for the levy costs. We did it in this year. We're going to do it next year and 2 more years. It provides for continued infrastructure improvements. The budgeted expenditures are $8.8 million less than the prior year, and that's mostly due to fewer capital projects. The budgeted expenditures excluding capital are 0.17% higher than the prior year forecasted expenditures. And the city has increased its cash reserves $8 million or 56% since 2009. I think that's important because I've heard people come up and say that we don't have enough reserves and that. And this gets us to about 37% in cash reserves overall. And there are some limitations by statute at 50%. So although we could keep adding to cash reserves, we have limited revenue and resources. And if you add more to cash reserves now, you're taking away from a department. So we have to balance that carefully. Here's a history of the valuations and the tax levy. And you can see that there for a while we were really just kind of treading water in here. We had a little nice bump there, but it went back down. Now we're starting to see some growth, about 4%. And so we decided that increasing this number, that 4% should be enough in the levy. That means for people with their homes, we are not increasing the rate. If their taxes go up, it's because their home has appreciated in value. Conversely, if their home goes down in value, they'll pay less taxes. That's something that the city has decided that is probably a fair deal. Here's a citywide budget summary. What this does is this lists our funds over here. It shows a beginning balance that we estimate for the end of this year. Here's that 22 million, up from 14 million several years ago. Our revenues, our expenditures, and the ending balance. And what one item you'll see here is for debt service, we have more than 1 year's of principal and interest in that number. So I think it was in the best interest of the city to reduce that cash reserve to about 1 year worth of principal and interest. Yeah, we're not going to be able to see that. What this shows, you're going to have to go to the packet or look online. This is the new budget. Here's the forecast for this current year. Here was the budget for this current year. Here's our new budget for 17-18. And then what this did was this gave you dollar variances between this column and a percentage, and dollar variances between the two budget years, this column and variances. And so we come down to 75 million.
Is that a 6+6 forecast?
This one was updated to the 9 plus 3.
Oh, 9 plus.
But the forecast, it is still just our best estimate of what we're going to spend by the end of this month. Let me tell you what else this is going on here. We started this budget, like I said, by asking all the department heads, tell us what you need to fulfill your mission. They gave us their requirements, and either they or we attached dollar amounts to those. When we received all those, we had $6.6 million more in wants than we had in resources. So again, you aren't going to be able to read this on this screen, but we went through and line by line picked out specific items that we believe that we could reduce the expenditures and still be able to serve the public in the way they've become accustomed. And you'll just have to grab one of these and read them for yourself, but they include everything from taking out splash pads that we had wanted to do in Southwest Bellevue. It removed those. It also removed over $1 million of personnel costs. It removed several requests for personnel ads. In total, this number here, when you add up every change we made, it was $6.6 million that we took out of the requests from the departments to get to this budget that is balanced, and we believe it should provide the same level of services that the citizens have come to expect. So we did what we could, line by line with specifics, to reduce it. And here's what we ended up with in a pie chart. You've got the revenue that comes, property taxes 27%, sales taxes 20%, fees and licenses 14%, bond proceeds and lease proceeds 20%. That is just something where the bond and lease proceeds for the stuff we're going to purchase and bond, they're counted as revenue for budget purposes. State aid 11%, occupation and business taxes 6%, other revenues 3%. There's grants and other cost sharing is 1%. That's the revenue pie chart. The expenditure pie chart, where we're going to spend it. Police 29%, Public Works 23%, Public Works infrastructure 22%, Fire and Rescue 12%, Mayor and City Council less than 1%, Admin and other 9%, Library and Recreation 3%, Planning and Permits 2%. That's where the money is going. Then in the packet, what you're going to see is a breakdown by department with the detail that it's still summarized. What it does is it has general categories of revenue, property taxes, sales taxes, occupation taxes. It goes down through broad categories and gives you the totals. And then expenditures, it has sales and wages. It shows you some base pay and overtime and some of the other wage components. And then it shows you the fringe benefit components, and it comes down to a total personnel cost. Then we've got departmental expenses, the expenses that in order to equip these people with the right tools to do their job. Then we lay out capital expenses, and then all other, and then we have some transfers, and it gets you down to to total expenditures, and then revenue less the total expenditures, kind of shows you your cash flow, what's going to happen during the year. And that goes, this is the general fund. We've got one for community betterment, economic development, community development, law enforcement trusts, and the debt service fund. And all of those are generally the same format. Sorry you can't see it on here. Wish we had better equipment to show it. And then the wastewater. Wastewater, what you heard is we've got some real challenges there, but let me tell you, they're doing a great job. They might not be happy with me because there were some cuts that we had to make, but if it performs anything close, right now they're budgeted to make $500,000 in the next year. If that comes close to that, they will put themselves in a position to be able to hire some of those internal resources that they believe they need, and it will give us the ability to go out and bond a big project. Because when you're looking at negative, really net cash flow, there aren't a lot of buyers out there for those bonds when they look at your financials and it says, boy, they can't even make enough to pay their people, let alone are they going to be able to pay me. This is good news. We've been working towards this for a few years, and I believe Epiphany and Jeff they're getting you there. So that's really good news. What I did is I just put in the packet the capital projects for the first year. Again, we just can't make it big enough. You're going to have to look at the packet online to see all those details. But this gives you the totals, and it gives you some of the descriptions, like under streets, this first one that says 36th Street, Phase 1, engineering, design, and right-of-way. Resurfacing, the next one, resurfacing Chandler Road, 26th to 36th. It gives you a little more detail when you look at it to tell what those projects really are that are in here that were not cut. And then on the last pages, it has even more description of each of those projects. So the budget, the appropriation that we're asking for is $75 million, just a little over $75 million, and it is balanced with the revenues of $75 million, and that is what we were able to come up with while we were still trying not to harm the departments and the services that are provided. So here we are, third reading, September 11th. This thing has to go to the state September 20th, and the tax levy, which will not change, 61 cents, it will stay in effect, but it begins 1/1/2018. So again, I apologize that some of those slides you just can't read. We try to pack a lot of information in there. In the packet, when you look at it, you should be able to read some of it, but trying to put it on the screen just isn't working out. Mr. Mangiamelli, did you have comments?
I hope so. Joe Mangiamelli, City Administrator. Just a few comments. I want to reiterate some of the things that Rich pointed out to you. Throughout the budget process, we did conduct an online citizen survey and got over 1,000 responses from the community, whereby the important message was that the citizens appreciate the services that are provided by the city. Do they want to pay any more for them? No, they do not. So our budget was developed under that premise that we need to be able to provide an acceptable level of service in each of our departments. And Rich pointed out and made it very clear that in that process, of identifying what the citizens expected and what we could deliver, we had to cut in excess of $6 million from the requests. Though that $6 million is not in the budget. And what is in the budget, as Rich pointed out, is a 0.17 increase over last year's budget. Now, I know we've got some demands that are facing us. You just heard earlier this evening about the sanitary sewer system. We're going to have to start developing a plan to address that. We've had requests to increase the opportunity to contribute more money to the 840 plan. We want to do that. But what we need from the council is the opportunity to adopt the budget that we have presented to you. And we're welcome to have a robust discussion on some of the items that you might have a question in. Our department heads are here to address specifically questions you might have. But I'm here to also ask you that you do not ask these departments to take on another arbitrary 5% reduction. It's inappropriate. It will not provide the level of service that the citizens expect. And in my opinion, it's unfair to the department heads who we've had to work with in order to get to the budget that we've presented to you this evening. As far as the sanitary sewer and 840, just two examples, we would ask for your flexibility. Rich mentioned that he believed the sanitary sewer fund with the rates that we've put in place will generate some additional revenue that we can begin that process of developing a plan to meet the needs of the sanitary sewer in fiscal year 2018. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to present to you an adequate plan that starts that effort, that also would provide perhaps additional staff or the start of some capital projects. We will bring that to you in the course of the year. Additional personnel and projects, as you've heard, both from Rich and from Epiphany this evening, are not in the current budget. We want to develop those as we go through the year and bring those plans to you for your consideration and approval. 840, if revenues come in higher than we anticipate and we can dedicate more resources to the 840 plan, we want to bring that to you. But to just start eliminating purchases or much needed equipment this evening without having the benefit of the information that you need, I am asking you that you not do that. Let us get involved in that robust debate with you and tell you why the citizens deserve what has been included in the budget. Those are my comments. I think you want to open it up for the public's comments on the issues that Rich has presented or questions that they may have. And then we'd like to discuss any proposals that council members might have.
Can I say one more thing here? The budget's a guideline with a limit on the total expenditures. And with a few exceptions, we can realign some of those resources during the year when the conditions warrant, because we've done our best to allocate those limited resources. But again, there can be some movement. There can't be any movement over the appropriation that you approve, but within that, it used to be that what I saw was some budgets were line item budgets, and departments would spend every line item. That is, I can tell you, that's not the case in Bellevue anymore. We scrutinize every expenditure. Just because that dollar amount is budgeted doesn't mean that somebody can just spend money to fill up that budget. So we have put a few extra controls in place, and as you've seen over the past few years, those cash reserves have increased because the departments have not spent money just to spend money. They've been very conservative and fiscally frugal when they've gone through their year in their operations. So just wanted to let you know that this thing some of the priorities can change during the year. And so as conditions change, and worst case, you can always come back and amend the budget before next September 30th.
Thank you, Mr. Severson. Don't go too far. Mr. Mangiamelli, did you want to read the ordinance?
Just a second here, let me get it. Yeah. Getting close. Sabrina, so that I don't flip through any more pages, would you read the title of that ordinance, please?
Sure. Ordinance number 3883, an ordinance to adopt the budget statement to be termed the annual appropriations bill, to appropriate sums for necessary expenses and liabilities, to provide for an effective date.
Thank you. I now open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak, please do so, and please limit your time to 5 minutes if possible. Thank you.
Steve Draper, I sent an email earlier today to two of the council members, which I understand everyone has. I have more copies here if someone wants a copy of it. I brought this issue up at the last meeting, and Don Priester asked me to identify where we could make cuts to add an additional $1 million to the cash reserve. And I want to applaud the finance director for showing how much is in the cash reserve. I wasn't aware of the amount that we had in there currently. And to some, that may appear to be a large amount. It's about 10% of what our annual budget is. It strikes me a little strange here that we're discussing in a somewhat perfunctory manner a budget when at the same time we're witnessing events that have happened in Texas and Florida, and going forward as though such things could never happen here in Bellevue, Nebraska. And I'm reminded of a tornado that went through here not too long ago that did quite a bit of devastating damage. It could have just as easily come up through Bellevue and destroyed this building and the new building that is being renovated. And I'm saying if that had happened, $8 million would have been a paltry sum for us to go forward for an emergency fund. So,
Mr. Draper,
I just
Rich,
wanted,
you might want to clarify. It's increased by $8 million. It's not $8 million.
okay, what is I don't know what the total is.
I think it was $37 million, wasn't it?
22 million.
Okay, so 22 million. Still, that would have been a insignificant amount had it come up through Bellevue. So I'm just encouraging that you put another $1 million in our reserve fund for the next 10 years. And I've identified, I looked at the items that I've specified here. Public works, streets, I'm proposing that you reduce that by 4.42%. That is still 389% higher than it was 2 years ago. Culture and recreation, I'm proposing you reduce that by 18.76%. That is still 341% higher than 2 years ago in the 15-16. And miscellaneous, I'm proposing to reduce that by 11.11%. That's $200,000 that wasn't even in there in the budget 2 years ago. So I'm suggesting that you look at this, doing this. Yes, you've made cuts, but I'd like you to make more. Thank you.
Do you want to say something, Mr. Severson?
There are statutory limits.
Yes, but on the disasters that would come through, the tornado, we've absorbed those this year. And also, we do have a good insurance plan and management. So I can't imagine a whole even 8 million. I think there could be issues where it costs us $1 million after our deductibles and that. But I just want to make sure people do know that we have a good insurance management, risk management department, and we make sure that we are covered for most of those events.
Thank you. Are there others that would like to comment on this item? Please do so at this time.
Good evening, Chuck Frederick, 1511 Madison Street. I'm going to try, I have a lot of stuff here, but I'm just going to go briefly, so won't go in detail. But it looks like we're spending more money than we are getting in taxes. And I've mentioned before, we need the state auditor to come down. That's imperative. And we need to go to a one-year budget instead of going a two-year. We also need to have no new hires. We need a freeze. We can do a couple things to increase our salaries. We can eliminate the assistant city administrator, let the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce rely upon them, which they've been doing a great job for economic purposes. We need to hire a full-time city attorney. We'll save a lot of money if we do that. And I saw that I think what we could do is we could cut the salaries of the top people by 20%. If you really want to make this city work like it should work, I'm excluding the police chief and the fire chief from this, but other people up here who have high salaries, I think they could be reduced. I know in the past you've always had compare other cities and try to make comparable salaries. But the problem with that is that these other cities are probably not doing real well financially, so they can afford to pay people more. And we can't afford to do that anymore. We made one of the biggest mistakes we ever made by taking away the rescue squad billing for Pat Shannon. We would have a lot more money if he was still doing it. We also leased a cell phone tower, and that was a mistake. We have to bring back the budget committee to help and put new fresh eyes on the audit committee. And the other thing is that on the library, I think I've seen where it's going to put $50 million for that, and that's fine. I'm a big library proponent. My daughter is a librarian, so obviously I am. But I had heard from a reliable source that some developer was willing to build a library and put some other businesses like a coffee shop, something else in there, and lease it back to the city. So if that's the case, we should be doing that. That's where we get our economic development from, having partnerships, like business partnerships. I want to see if anything else I covered here quickly. Oh, then on the budget itself, I noticed that the 2013, 14, 15, and 16, the mill levy stayed the same, but the valuation went up just not that much each year. Went from 276, 270, 272, 276, but then 2017 it was 2.99. So in reality, instead of bragging about keeping the mill levy the same, maybe we should be able to reduce the mill levy, because our evaluations have gone up. That's a real nice trick where you don't raise the mill levy, but you raise the valuation, so we still pay more taxes. So maybe it's time to actually reduce the mill levy. I think that's most of what I have. I can't, I think I'm within my 5 minutes. Oh, no money for the World Baseball Village either. We need to stop spending money foolishly and think about our taxpayers. And I think I said I should hire a full-time city attorney. I think that's most of it. I've covered most of this over the few years I've been talking to the city council, so most of you know where I stand, and I'm hoping that we can get the city back in financial shape. Thank you.
Mr. Severson. Mr.
I don't know where to start here. It just seems like for some, the facts get in the way of vitriol. So one thing, it is a one-year budget, and as far as there is no money to give back for World Baseball Village. Again, I think that this budget is appropriate for Bellevue's circumstances right now. And if we can continue to grow the valuations, then maybe there will be more resources for the departments. But right now, the one thing that I heard that is right is that all the taxes and revenue are going to pay operating expenses instead of having some of the sales taxes go to specific infrastructure projects. That's true. We need to figure out how to fix that. I'm not sure this is the year to fix that, because how you fix that in our situation is personnel. So.
Thank you. Mr. Mangiamelli.
Rich, would you bear with me one clarification on what you said? Grow the valuation. You're not talking about just growing by revaluation, but you're talking about growth in the community, new properties being built and taxed.
Anything that will increase that 2.99 significantly, because it's still, for each 1% that goes up with the rate being constant, that's still only $300,000-ish. You've got a big city with significant expenses. That's only one component. There still has to be a cost management component, but that would certainly help. With that comes more sales taxes, comes more not just property taxes, sales taxes, hotel taxes, occupation taxes. It gets on a roll, and it gives you more resources without putting more of the pain on the existing citizens.
Good evening, Mayor Sanders, members of the council. I'm here again to advocate for fully funding LB 840. Again, appreciate, in the course of a meeting, we've gone from Constitution Day to recognizing public service and the disaster preparedness. We've talked about sewers and the issues to come. We've talked about fire pensions, police pensions, ethical codes. There is a plethora of things this city has to handle, and economic development is one of them. And if you look at our current system for budgeting and what we're budgeting, I would respectfully suggest that maybe this gets overlooked in our process. And what's dawned on me as I think through our process, I believe Mr. Severson mentioned that typically we go out and we ask department heads, what are your inputs, what are your requests, and then we figure out what is it that we can do to accommodate current services with the funds that we have. Well, LB 840 was new. 2014, the voters approved it. 2015 was the first year it came forward. So again, as a new program, we don't have a department head advocating for it. It's suddenly something new that's trying to work itself into the budget. And this is the third year for LB 840. So again, I think it gets lost in the budgeting process. And again, I think one of the things that I heard tonight, which again, I think it's a normal process. You figure out here's the revenues we have coming in. Here's all the requests we're having for services. We try to marry them up. You're already trimming 10% from what people would like, but then you're basically saying the best we can do is retain services that we have that people have become accustomed to. I heard that theme a couple of times this evening. And again, with economic development, we have no track record with that. We have no history with it in terms of having a separately funded, separately developed budget. And this is our third year, and we need to start getting into that habit. I think Mr. Mangiamelli mentioned, he said, if you're patient with us, in the course of the year, if we have additional funds that come in, we'll set that money aside. LB 840 could be one of those that we fund. Mr. Severson said the same thing. If our circumstances change, if we can realign, if conditions, something shifts and we have more money, we'll put it in there. Well, it reminded me 2 weeks ago, I think it was Brian Holan, and he said it a whole lot more articulately than I can. But he said, if we don't pay ourselves first, you're never going to save. So again, if we don't make economic development a priority and we set that money aside from day one and prioritize it, there's never going to be money for it. I think Mr. Holan gave the example of a 401k. You know, your employer, you do that stuff automatically, it comes out of your check, you never see it. If you don't see it, you don't spend it, and suddenly you have savings for retirement. Again, LB 840, the goal is to build up this pot of money so that if an applicant comes forward and says, Bellevue, I'd love to come to that Highway 34 corridor, but I need you to help me with X, Y, and Z. Well, X, Y, and Z is going to cost money. And if we wait until they show up knocking on the door and we have not put money into this fund, we are not going to have the funds and the resources available to lure that developer to Bellevue. That's my fear. So I'm asking you again this evening, let's make economic development a priority this year. I'd ask you to fully fund the LB 840 fund, $750,000, and not wait for a rainy day to see if we have extra funds to do it. Thank you.
Are there others?
Good evening, Rusty Hike. I live at 15402 Highway 75 South, Bellevue, Nebraska. Actually, I'm sorry, they just changed that, 15402 South 10th Street, Bellevue, Nebraska. They moved my driveway for the third time, so. I didn't come with anything specific to talk about. I just wanted to throw in my thoughts on economic development. While I was sitting out there, I pulled up this article. It was written by Eugene Curtin, Bellevue Leader, in October of 14. I believe it was the same time the Highway 34 bridge opened. I just want to take an excerpt, four contiguous paragraphs here. Hope is also high that the arrival of a direct and toll-free connection between Highway 75 in Nebraska and U.S. Interstate 29 in Iowa will spur a wave of economic development on 5,000 acres of land north and south of the Nebraska side of the bridge. Bellevue Mayor Rita Sanders is taking a wait-and-see attitude towards whether the bridge proves to be a short-term boon for Bellevue or not. She said the possibility exists that traffic exiting the bridge will head west along Platteview Road and never enter the city. The challenge, Sanders said, is to develop the 5,000 acres around the bridge so that the traffic is directed toward the city. You're right on that. You have to develop that area around the bridge so it doesn't pass us. You said that 3 years ago. It's not just Mayor Sanders that's taking that wait and see. Us as a city's taking the wait and see. We had a $250, $300 million gift given to us that most cities would love to have, and that's that bridge, an interchange, the Kennedy Freeway. And it's just sitting there. No plans, no funding to help it out. We need to fund LB 840. There's lots of programs we heard tonight that need funded. We don't fund those without economic development. When you budget, you kind of take off your food budget off the top of your budget and you budget down from there. You have to have food to live. I've got a bigger budget for food than some, but economic development is food for our city. If you don't have it, you're going to get smaller. We're going to be cutting services. We're going to ask those departments to shrink in size because we can't fund it. You can't put it all on the residents' taxpayers. The city to the west of us, I don't know if you've noticed, but 72nd Street, they just improved that to concrete with some utilities all the way to Platteview Road. They have 84th Street. They've also started 66th Street. They're building a loop around Bellevue. And we're all letting it happen. Anyway, that's just some food for thought when you're deciding on funding LB 840. Thank you.
Are there others? See none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Preister.
Mayor, I'll move to approve ordinance number 2883, the annual... 3883, the annual appropriations bill.
We have a motion, I need a second.
We're going to have a discussion. We need to have it on the table.
Second.
Second by Mr. Cook. Discussion or questions? Mr. Modry. We're moving a little slow. It's a warm up here.
We're tired, I think. All right, I'll start it off. When I look at the budget, I look at what did we spend last year and what are we asking for this year, as closely as I can, you know, not having all the actual figures in for the full year and that kind of thing. And when I start seeing large percentage differences between some of those items, it really makes me pause as a taxpayer. So I have some things we can discuss, I guess, and we can figure out why, you know, why we are asking for so much more, perhaps, in some of these areas. Maybe not a big dollar amount, but the building maintenance is asking for a 29.1% increase in overtime for next year. Is there some reasoning for that? Is there some reason why we expect almost 30% more overtime?
Mr. Sievers, or Mr. Roberts, would you like to comment?
Primarily, that's we're short-staffed in our fleet maintenance department, and in order to get the fire, rescue, police outfitted to keep them up, they've been having to work extra overtime, and so that's just to keep our fleet forces running.
Okay. Do we? Yeah. Go.
Mr. Preister.
Just a follow-up, Mr. Roberts. If we had a hiring freeze, would that just exacerbate it? I mean, you're saying we have to work overtime because we don't have the staff now.
Yeah, it would. We're short-staffed now, and we're in the process of another person is leaving in 2 weeks. And so again, we'll be down 2 people. And so it just, and they're positions that are specialized. And in order to fill these positions, you're talking larger amounts of income than what we're offering. And so it makes us not very competitive as far as this goes.
So,
And these are mostly with the fire apparatus.
so you already expect to have, be down another person
Yes,
for this next
we
year?
have a person who just resigned this week.
Yeah, okay. In fleet maintenance, the budget is requesting a 160.4% increase in that department's expenditures.
That was because the last 2 years, whatever reason, all the software that they use to do all their diagnostic and their inventory was not included in that budget, so this year it all got put back in. That's the primary reason for that one.
Where was that money at then last year?
I'm sorry?
Where was that money allocated last year? Within, in IT or a different department, or?
It wasn't at all. It was left completely out, so we had to make concessions in order to keep those software licensed. We also, in this budget, before I forget, is we have another program that we are required to get because it's a specialized program that now the police cruisers are using. And for us to be able to operate these, or to work on these, we have to have this new software.
Because it's about $119,000 more
It's,
than last year.
there's, yeah, that's what the electronics and everything that we use nowadays do cost a lot more. And then the support system with it.
Wow. Okay, that's,
So Jeff, bottom line, this is making up for unfunded liabilities from prior year.
That's correct.
we seem to be doing that in a lot of places. All right. I know police and fire are often sacred ground, but police is asking for a 9.1% increase in their department expenditures, about $127,000 more for this next year. Are there some particular items that may go into that? I know Chief Albert's not here, but you're probably pretty aware.
He is not, and I'll attempt to answer the question as best I can, but overall with the expenditures and the technology we're trying to keep up with, we're trying to fund, to put in some in-car cameras, body cameras, other equipment like that, the normal costs of the personnel and everything that we have, trying to maintain those numbers. Most of that is made up with the equipment and just trying to keep up with the technology.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. These are huge to me, you know, from one year to the next, these things go up that much. A 12.9% increase in overtime for the police department, and you're adding 4 new officers this year. I would think that would help keep your overtime down a little bit.
We're not adding additional officers, we're trying to backfill for those that we have been down for several years.
Okay.
We're currently down 2 officers as we speak today, and with that, we've also got people that are out on modified duty. They're ill, unable to work, and we also have people who are in the military and being deployed. So when those people are not available for shift work, then we have to backfill them with the overtime.
Right, you're backfilling 4 positions that were open really last year, right? And so, I don't know, that should help with,
We were down 6 positions most of last year.
okay. That even makes my point more, I think. Fire and rescue, a 14% increase in department expenditures from last year, $164,500 almost. Chief, what do you have?
I think the best way to go about this is to say we haven't been funded here the way we should be funded. I mean, it is, you take the police budget right now, it's 29%, I think is what Rich said, of the total expenditures for the city. Typically, you'll see 80 to 85% of a police budget is what it takes to run a fire department in the same city. That's typically what you'll see across the country, 80 to 85. That means our 12% expenditure would be 24%. We have been pushing things back for so long, kicking the can down the road. There's no more road. There's no more road. I can give you some examples of things that we've had in the CIP that were supposed to be funded in 2014. We were going to replace an engine. That was in the CIP to replace an engine, 21, a 1994 Seagrave. Replace utility 24, which is a 1991 utility hazmat unit. In 2015-16 CIP, we were going to replace an engine 31, which is now engine 31, which is a 1994 Seagrave. Replace Medic 15, a 1996 Freightliner. Replace 13 mobile data computers that are 10 years old. These were submitted in 2011 in anticipation that we would have to start doing rotating stock replacements and equipment replacements. 2012, we were submitted for the 2016-17 CIP. Replace Communications 1, a 2001 F-250. Replace a Fire Car 6, a 2000 Chevy 25, a Chevy truck. Replace a Fire Car 3, 1999 Chevy. Replace portable radios. In 2017, what we had, which was submitted in 2012, was to replace Medic 31, a 2006 International. Replace Fire Car 9, a 2001 Crown Victoria. Replace Brush 3. It goes on and on and on. We've been pushing these things back. So when you say you see these giant increases, they've been unfunded, and we have been asked and told there's no money. My job is not to tell people what the service should be. It's to tell you what the service is. We talk about the med units. We've got 6 med units, but in the last, since February through current times of this last February to now, a total of 65 times we've had 2 or more units out in repairs. We've got 2 aerials right now that have been out of service for 3.5 months. The one that we do have in service has a boom on it that's a half a century old. We're done. We're out of road to kick the can.
I understand that, but I saw these same kind of large percentage things 2 years ago as well. So,
And they have been unfunded.
and I don't know why. Yeah, we have these kind of increases in the budget every time.
With all due respect, we've had a fire department changeover from 2009 from an all-volunteer
Right.
with no funding mechanism put in place. We've talked about that numerous times, and we're still here today with no funding mechanism put in place, which we are looking at and actively pursuing. But as of yet, we haven't done that. And now we're just paying the price at this point.
Great, thank you. There are a lot of items. I could go through a whole bunch. I don't think I want to do that. I don't know. I'm always at somewhat of a loss of these kind of numbers every year. And I don't know. It may be needed, but boy, it really does not look good when you see 100 and some percent increases from the previous year, 50%, 30%. I don't know if there's anything we can do, anything that can be adjusted or not. Maybe we can go to capital expenditures area. One item on the police department is for the car impound lot and the canine training facility, $1.5 million. Can you talk a little bit about the need for that and what, where we take vehicles now, what kind of volume that entails, what, if you think there would be any revenue from this kind of operation?
There would be revenue from this. We've done quite a bit of research with a local impound lot in central Nebraska. Compared their numbers to ours, what we would do if we were to impound our own vehicles. We currently contract with 2 tow operators locally. for all of our impounds. They keep the vehicles on their lots and so forth, and collect the storage fees for them if they're not picked up right away. We anticipate that from those storage fees, as well as the sales of cars that are not picked up, they are turned over to us for whatever reason, that the sale of those vehicles would generate a fairly substantial income, which would offset the cost of this facility,
Okay.
and that eventually it would cash flow for us.
That's the kind of information we need. And I think a number of questions were asked on that, and we didn't really get those answers on that car impound lot.
Mr. Modry, Mr. Mangiamelli would like to say a few
Yes.
words.
There were a lot of questions asked about those, and the response that you got, Councilman, was that this is a project in progress, that we want to be able to research a little bit more to identify the potential revenue that this could create, as well as the convenience to the citizens of Bellevue by establishing an impound lot in the city that could serve this property, or serve this purpose. We would hope that within the first 6 months of the year that we would be able to develop a complete plan that would identify all of the potential costs, the potential revenues to be received, and the benefits to be derived from creating an impound facility in Bellevue. We would hope that that information could be shared with you at that point, and that you would either find it acceptable or unacceptable, in which case then the proposal would be moved forward or dropped. If it's dropped, well, then there's $1.5 million that could be used for other purpose. We think that we can make a good argument to present to you. We don't have the argument yet, but we want to keep this money in the budget so that we can present that argument. And if it works, then we can strike as quickly as possible to acquire a piece of property that might be available without having to wait 18 months for that for a property to become available, and we start looking at that point. So yes, there were a lot of legitimate questions that were asked, and we will answer all those questions and more when we're ready to present the project. You also mentioned in your writing that there's a K-9 training facility attached to that. We believe that a joint use of the piece of property, that whatever we could acquire would be supported. And we think that there's some private donations that are out there in the community that would help offset some of the public costs for this. Again, we want to bring this to you in complete detail upon which you can make a decision whether it's thumbs up or thumbs down.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook. Oh, wait, hold on just a moment. I think Rich Severson would like to add a comment here.
Yeah, Mr. Modry, you had talked about a lot of large percentage increases. I think you said that your methodology is to take the current budget and compare it to that forecast, what we actually spent this year or whatever. Can you tell me what this total $75 million budget, what that total expenditure increase is year over year? It's on page 7. It's what, 1.2%. But I noticed that you didn't talk even one time about the reductions that we found in this budget. You cherry-picked it, how we put together this budget. Each of those accounts, they had to build them from scratch. They have reasons, items, and they itemized those. We answered those in 13 pages of questions that you asked. And I think I heard you a little bit ago say, we didn't answer the questions appropriately.
I was not referring to those questions.
Oh,
I was
there were
referring to
other
the questions on the car impound lot and K-9
But you
training
agree,
center.
1.2% is the increase over the forecast.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. This impound lot would be bonded out. That's not actual money in the budget. It would be something that if we would move forward with, we would bond it.
Yes, if you took that expenditure out, we would also take the funding source out. So it would have zero effect on the
Budget.
bottom line.
Bottom,
It would
okay.
reduce expenditures by 1.5 million. It would reduce revenues by 1.5 million.
Thank you. I guess my concern, Joe, is that, you know, we've absolutely have got nothing on this that I'm aware of. And I don't know why we're tying in the canine training side of it. Maybe that could be set up at the fire training facility or whatever. I don't know what it all entails to have I think we only have about 4 dogs. What it all would entail to have a training facility. The city, I'm almost positive, years ago, the city did have an impound lot and got away from it. And I don't know why. I believe there is money to be made. But I guess, why was this pushed up as a top priority when we were cutting 6.8 million in other things? Why, you know, you're saying hopefully in the next 6, 8, 9 months we'll present you something. I like to see at least this get pushed to the next budget, 18-19 year, because we have not yet gotten anything on it. You know, we got bridges and things that could probably be budgeted and repaired. And I drove down by the bottom, down below, and, you know, a few years ago, we moved the Parks Department up in northwest Bellevue, and I'm telling you, there's quite a bit of land down there that sits pretty idle, that's already fenced in, and so like that. So I'm not trying to say this is where we need to go, but we have got no information on this, and the impression I'm getting is it's going to be such a good thing, we're still going to want to bond it and do something this year. I simply would like to push it to the next year and take this year for you to put it together and present it to the council, and if we're in agreement, we may not need to purchase land. We may be able to cohabitate with Papillion or La Vista and pick a mutual site. There's a lot of ifs here, and we automatically put 1.5 million into where we want to do something this next budget year. And I just think there's other priorities, and I don't know if I want to throw it off the table, but I think I'd like to push it a year.
Mr. Mangiamelli?
Well, Mr. Cook, with all due respect, we didn't automatically put it in there. It was a request of the police department. Again, we hope that we can put together a package for you that you can evaluate the expenses that we anticipate as well as the revenue. If this is a good deal, we'd like to get it going as soon as possible so that the city can benefit, the citizens can benefit. City benefits from the proceeds, the citizens benefit from a consolidated one-stop shop. So, I mean, it wasn't anything automatic. It was one of those things that we felt, even though we cut $6.6 million, that this was an opportunity for Bellevue.
Mr. Shannon?
Yeah, I think this impound lot's a good candidate for an enterprise fund. I think that there's a real opportunity here, and that would help the police department greatly if you approached it from that standpoint. Because it is a net zero to the budget, there's no reason not to leave it in. If we don't do it, it doesn't cost us. I mean, you know, let's leave the possibility there. You know, they still have to bring a plan. They still have to get our approval. There's no reason to delay it at this point because it's not costing us anything. It's truly a zero revenue impact item.
Mr. Hanson?
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you. I also believe, as far as the canine side, that there's a lot of public support for private folks to step up and put money into something like this. I think there's a huge amount of, if you look around a lot of the facilities around town, you'll see a lot of little boxes that people put money in there. There's a children's fund, and there's the dog fund, and the dog fund is filled with money. So I'm telling you what, there's a lot of support for that, so.
Are there any other questions, comment, Mr. Hanson?
Oh, okay. You know, when I think about what Mr. Modry said, you know, all these items, you know, which I think Rich said might be cherry picking a little bit. I'm kind of looking at this LB 840 as represents if we added 500,000, I think you had 250, so, bring it to the 750, that's less than 1% of our budget. And it just seems in a $75 million budget with less than 1%, there should be a possibility of finding something without us going item by item. Give a good example, what you mentioned earlier is on the wastewater system. It looks like we might be able to save $500,000. Now, I'm not saying that that should go in the economic fund, but again, you're not going to really hire anybody unless you start making money on that, I believe. So that's an unfounded, don't know for sure type thing. It just seems that I would like to see us fund that. I'd like to see it make as a priority. I do believe that if we don't, if there's extra money, there's going to be 8 million other groups out there that's all going to want it right away. And I think that LB 840 is a good thing to do. We can't just wait until something pops up, maybe 10 years, with that Highway 34, unless they figure out the floodplains and all that. It might be 10 years, and we might have a really good fund in there to be able to go ahead and do something. So I'm very supportive of adding that, making that the full amount, that $750,000.
Mr. Shannon.
I think the one number that jumped out at me in Rich's presentation tonight was the cost of health care for the city employees, moving from $4 million to $5 million in 1 year. That is a huge jump. You went from 3.9 to 4.9, so I'm rounding. But, I mean, that's a huge jump, and, that's not sustainable if we keep going up those kinds of numbers. So I hope that there's something being done to, mitigate costs there, or, we're going to have to take other measures. But we can't keep paying 100% of healthcare costs if they're going up at that pace. Okay, so that's one item I wanted to comment on. Another item I want to comment on is 15th Street, where it goes in front of Walmart. I think that this is one of the projects that's being ignored, and the extension of 15th Street from Cornhusker all the way to 370 would create another economic boom for Bellevue, and would create a whole new commercial corridor. And I'd like to see us put something in the budget to conduct a study over the next year to see the feasibility and costs of, completing that, because that would solve an existing problem, and that would give us a corridor for people to get out of Walmart by, getting either to 370 or to Cornhusker. But opening that land up will create a whole bunch of brand-new commercial real estate that would allow new businesses to come into Bellevue, generate more real estate taxes, more sales taxes. And I think that if we did that, that would fill way before the Highway 34 corridor did. I mean, because that's where we're at today, and that's where the traffic is today. So that's another project that, I think should be looked at as a priority.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all the council comments, the public comments, and I appreciate the engagement in this budget. It is important. I appreciate the administration and the work that has gone into this. Certainly our finance director, Mr. Severson, already identified the needs were there just to maintain the level of service, and yet he and the city administrator worked to cut that almost 10% average across the board. As I said last meeting, some were 15, there were different amounts, but that's a sizable cut already. If we're going to maintain the service, anything that we cut means we postpone a project. Budget after budget, we've balanced that budget by postponing things. Most of it has been in public works. Rightfully so, their projects and all the things they do are half the budget, so they get a big hit. The police, we've balanced it by putting things off in the police department. We've really put it off in the fire department, as the chief told us. Now, we can keep kicking those cans down the road. We can put hiring freezes on. We can stop projects and not do things. But we heard in the survey, as the administrator said, people don't want less service. They want the service maintained. We've annexed areas. We've added miles to what the street department does. We have added without adding appropriate staff in the street department, in our wastewater department, in our parks department. we've got staff needs, and when we see an increase, most of these increases are because we put things off. We didn't do them, we shifted it, we kicked the can down the road, and then suddenly it catches up and we see what looks like a big jump. If we had done things incrementally, if we had planned and added things a little at a time, it wouldn't be such a big jump. So hopefully we can be farsighted and do these things in a systematic way. I prefer not bonding them because I don't like paying interest, especially I think our interest rates are going to go up. So if we can do these things and do it in a systematic way, our sewers, our full-time firefighters, and the transition from the SAFER grants that's coming up next year, we've got more of a challenge coming in next year's budget. None of them are easy, but the more we put off this time into the future, the harder those decisions are going to be. So I think this is a good budget. I thank the staff for the agonizing that they did. I thank the headmaster and the taskmasters and mistress who have been kind of beating on the staff to reduce things. It was not an easy job. So I'm not willing to change anything, because anything you change at this point means something else has to give somewhere. And I think a good process has unfolded. It's been public. It has served us well, and I'm ready to vote on it.
Mr. Hanson.
I would like to make an amendment to the budget to fully fund LB 840 at $750,000.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Discussion, questions?
I would think that if we took a very simplistic approach to this, if we're going to add something, we have to subtract something.
Right.
And, you know, well, I'm going to suggest it. Yeah, I'm going to suggest it. I think that funding LB 840 is a good suggestion, and I was going to make the motion if you didn't. So, yes. Yeah, I could have taken the heat for you. I would say that we could fund this by eliminating the assistant city administrator, eliminating the assistant building chief, and the assistant public works director. Those three positions going away would fund the remaining, $450,000 to $500,000 needed to do this. So, if you're willing to make those changes, that would fund it.
3 positions is not going to fund $300,000.
More than that, it's 500,000.
But 500,000.
And assistant city administrator is 200,000 by the time you add in his expense account.
He
Or
doesn't have an
180 to
expense
200.
account, but
Mr. Severson, did you have something to add?
More than happy to do whatever we're instructed to do. The existing funding came from community betterment. Instead of going to war, one thing would, that is an option. We do have plans for community betterment, but certainly if we can get growth in that part of our community, it's going to help the whole community. I don't know if there would be any further restrictions if we're already funding it from community betterment, if using that other amount from those existing funds would be opposed by anyone. It would be a quick way to get that done.
what is the balance in that account, Rich? Is it sufficient?
We expect it to be 5.8 million by the end of this next year. Yeah, I thought we were going to do some more swimming pools and aquatic centers. So that would change it from a 5.8 million balance to a 5.3 million balance.
So we could afford another 200,000 for a study to get 15th Street extended.
Don't push it.
Hey, Rich? That will not change our tax levy request amount then, correct?
Correct.
So we could still have that hearing tonight?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd prefer all those are ready to go and actually have been with the leader.
So I would specify that it came from community betterment.
I'll amend that it comes from community betterment funds.
So we have an amendment, we need a second.
Good on your second?
I second that.
Thank you. Are there any other amendments? Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, word of caution here, we are spending this as incentive money. Cities all over get into bidding wars, providing incentives to draw people in, and we give this incentive, and then somebody else offers more, and we go down that road with no assurance. We then have more infrastructure we've got to put in. We're already having problems with existing sewers that we can't pay for. That area needs sewers, it needs streets, it needs all the infrastructure. This is the first step, and I think we need to do it with some caution. I think we're doing it too quickly. It's no guarantee, there's no plan. It's simply saying, we've got a pool here that we can offer. Then we get into that bidding war with other states, and they use it to go someplace else. I think we need some, but I think this is too quick. I think the 250 we've got in it is sufficient for now. We can do this at a later time. It doesn't even necessarily have to be in the budget because it's not affecting the mill levy. If we want to appropriate it when we have something, it's still in the same community betterment fund. To earmark it this soon, I'm not sure is a good idea. We need some caution here, taking it from a fund that has a tremendous amount of needs on it, even though it's got a lot of money in it.
Mr. Severson, are you wanting to say something?
The total appropriation would be total expenditure. In this case, I would have to show the 500,000 as an expenditure and the other 500,000 as a revenue. That means your 75 million would go up 500,000 for budgetary and so that means if you didn't change it, we would be restricted. We would have to save 500,000 somewhere or come back to you with an amendment if we did spend the whole 75 million. So if you're going to do it, I would say increase that appropriation amount and the total expenditure.
Thanks for the clarification. My correction.
But it is still in a fund that's transferable and borrowable.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second to the amendment. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? Are there other amendments? Please vote.
Vote is 4-2.
Thank you. So are we ready to vote on the budget?
Pat, does that require 5 votes?
What's that?
Oh,
That motion require 5 votes?
No, just 4.
Okay.
any questions, comments? Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Okay, resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also with that is resolution number 2017-13, setting the property tax request for fiscal year 2017, 2018.
I need a motion for the
I make a motion to approve.
Oh, we have to do that to discuss, huh?
Yes.
All right, I'll second it.
Sabrina, did you get that? Give us just a second while they empty the chambers. Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Shannon, a second by Mr. Burns. Got it? Discussion, questions?
Yeah, will you guys just clarify really quick? I guess I'm just a little confused. Is this, sure that Oh, this is just to keep the property tax, I mean, for what it is right now. Is that making sense? How
Mr.
much-
Severson, would you like to explain the resolution,
Yeah,
please?
that's all. I just wanted to make sure.
Pat could probably do it better, but it's to set the tax request. It's our valuation times the 61 cents. So that 61 cents doesn't change. The valuation has changed. It's doing the multiplication and giving the county that 1% that they take for collection.
Okay.
So it's setting the request that we ask for.
Okay.
Mr. Burns, the best way I can explain it is it's probably one of the dumbest laws we have on the books. Because if you request any dollar amount of tax dollars, other than what the exact penny was that you asked last year, you have to have this special hearing. Even if you were dropping it $1 million, you still have to have this hearing. It's just a dumb law.
So, we have a motion on the resolution, a second. Any other discussion? See none, please vote. Everybody vote? No?
I did.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item 2 is approval of the FY 2018, FY 2023 City of Bellevue Capital Improvement Plan.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Shannon, second by Mr. Preister. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 8.
Item 8 is ordinances for public hearing, second reading. Sub-item A is approval, or excuse me, ordinance number 3884, amending section 8-41 of the Bellevue Municipal Code. I'll read the title. An ordinance to amend section 8.41 of the Bellevue Municipal Code pertaining to the definition of dangerous buildings to repeal section 8-41 of the Bellevue City Code as heretofore existing and to provide for the effective date of this ordinance.
Thank you. I'll now open up for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time. I see none. I'll close the public hearing. The third and final reading will be on Monday, September the 25th. Item 9.
Item 9 is ordinances for introduction. Sub-item A is ordinance number 3885, rezoning lots 1 through 107 and outlots A through H, Bellalago from AG to RE, RG 50-PS, and RG 28-PS. The applicant is Boyer Young Development, general location 48th Street and Cape Hart Road.
Thank you. The second reading and public hearing will also be on Monday, September 25th. Mr. Shannon. Mr. Sullivan.
I have a question. Going back to item D1, the resolution 2017-13, setting the property tax request. Did we open that up for a public hearing? I think we need to go back and re-vote on that.
Okay.
And have it open for public hearing.
Okay, do we want to finish item number 9, the second ordinance? That's in 9, and then go back?
That's fine.
All right, hang on. I have 2 comments on that first reading.
Go ahead. Do we want the comments first, or do we want the reading first?
Well, you're moving to another item, so let's get the comments.
Okay.
All right. It's my understanding that Public Works no longer wants the small parks added into these subdivisions, so nobody's drawing the parks in. But then there's supposed to be a bigger park somewhere around for these subdivisions. So I'd like to see where the bigger park's going as we keep getting these subdivisions coming in. You know, okay, here's one getting away without putting a park in. Great. Where's the bigger park for these people going to go? Because if we don't do it now, then the next developer comes in and he's gonna take this land. Well, now it can't go there. So, I mean, we need to commit to a park somewhere in these projects. The other thing is, I'd like to see the future use of the land in the areas we're talking about. We're putting a lot of houses and developments into, you know, between 370 and Platteview Road, between 36th and 60th, you know, that area. What's the future use of the land projected to be right now? Where's the commercial corridor? Where are the businesses gonna go to support all these houses that we're putting in? And I'd like to see something from Public Works in the packet, when we come up for second reading, talking to us about where are these commercial corridors gonna go? What is the future land use of these areas? And where is this big park going that's supposed to service these people, because they don't get the little park that's drawn into, the plan? So that's just an ask for, next meeting.
Okay. We're going to go back to item 7D1, Resolution 2017-13. I'm going to open up for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on Resolution 2017-13, please do so at this time. See none, I'll close the public hearing. Do we need to re-vote on this as well?
I will move to approve. Mr.
We have a motion by Mr. Shannon and a second by Mr. Preister. Discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item 7D2, approval of the fiscal year 2018, 2023. Did we open for public?
We don't need it for that one.
Okay. But we did vote on that one correctly? Okay, so moving on to item
9B is ordinance number 3886, amending section 8.05 of the zoning ordinance regarding wireless communication towers and antennas.
Thank you. The second reading and public hearing will also be on Monday, September 24th. Sabrina, do you have everything? Are we good? Okay. Item 10, public hearing on matters other than ordinance.
Item 10A is a public hearing on the event license application from a bridal boutique and Tux Margie Guy for the Old Town Trick or Treat event on October 29, 2017, from 2 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
I'll now open for public hearing on this item. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please do so at this time. And thank you for waiting 3 hours to speak on this item.
I did have to send the 7-year-old home, though.
Thank you.
Margie Guy, I'm here with the Bridal Boutique and Tux, coordinating our which will be our second annual Halloween event. I will open it up if anybody has any questions for me at this point.
I'd like to make a comment. Last year was a huge success, and I know you're taking it on again this year. And I know you're already working with Parks and Rec, I believe, on closing roads, and you're also working with our police. So thank you for that, and I wish you bigger success this year. So are there any questions from the council?
Nope, just a comment that we appreciate anything that you do in the Old Town area, because those of us that live and hibernate down there, yeah, we love any event that can bring people down there and help the businesses down there, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Burns?
I just want to make a motion, or does anybody else
I'll
have
need
any
to close the
comments?
public hearing
Oh,
first.
okay.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Just thank you, everybody, for your support.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak on this item? See none, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Burns?
Oh, all right. I'll make a motion that we approve the event license application from A Bridal Boutique and Tux / Margie Guy for the Old Town Trick or Treat event on October 29th, 2017, from 2 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Second by Mr. Modry. Questions, discussion? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Moving on tonight, item 12, current business.
Item A is approval for the mayor to sign the service agreement with Physio Control to provide a total of 5-year warranty and service for the newly purchased cardiac monitors for a total of $20,736 in payments of $5,184 per year.
Mr. Shannon?
I would move to approve signing of the agreement with Physio Control to provide for the 5-year warranty contract and the signing of the 5-year warranty contract, and for the allocation of $5,184 for this year's payment, because that's the only funds being expended right now. We're not expending the $20,000, we're only expending the $5,184. So the motion will be to expend only that amount of funds.
But you're authorizing the agreement for the
We're
5-year
authorizing the
period.
agreement and the mayor to sign the full agreement, but we're only authorizing the expenditure of $5,184. That was per Rich.
Well, let me get him to do the second, then we'll have discussion. How's that?
What's that?
We'll have Mr. Burns do the second, because we have a motion here. We need a second. And
Well,
and then we could go into discussion.
I have to.
Second, and I'll explain.
Okay, but were you amending that, or are you just trying to
No.
explain it to us? Okay, that's all I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure. Okay, I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Burns.
Yeah, what we did not want to do was approve the allocation of $20,000 right now, because that's not what's going to be spent. Only the $5,000 is being spent right now. So we're just wanting to make sure that we only allocate the $5,000, because that's the payment for this year.
As it's stated. It's on the agenda. Chief Guido, did you want to say a few words?
I just want to make sure that we're not allocating that in this budget year, it's for next budget year. Because there is a 1-year warranty, which the warranty will expire in next year's budget year, and so then you will make that first payment, but it doesn't take effect until 1 year from the purchase, which is going to be in this next budget year.
Which covers year 2.
Correct.
Mr. Severson, we're on 12A, in case you're wondering. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item B is approval of the purchase of 4 copy machines for the police department from Capital Business Systems.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion, we approve the purchase of 4 copy machines for the police department from Capital Business Systems. Do we have a dollar amount?
Yes,
Is it in there?
it is, hang on just a second. A total of they're individual purchases. One is $25.79. Another one is $25.79. A third one is $3,034, and another one is $3,034.
Does that total up to $13,016? It's on the cover sheet.
3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah.
So my motion, I always thought we wanted to add a dollar amount. So I'm gonna say $13,016.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Discussion, questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item C is approval of the annual support agreement with QTEL for the maintenance and support of the QTEL evidence system.
Mr. Burns.
I make a motion that we approve the annual support agreement with you said QTEL?
QTEL.
For the maintenance and support of the QTEL evidence system.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Preister. Discussion, questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.
Item D, approval of an authorization for Captain Dargy to sign a software sharing agreement on a renewal basis with the Nebraska State Patrol.
Mr. Burns.
I make a motion that we approve and authorize for Captain Dargy to sign a software sharing agreement on a renewable basis with the Nebraska State Patrol.
Second.
Second by Mr. Preister. Discussion, questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Item E is the approval of the purchase of 10 AED 1000s from Physio Control, Inc. for $21,530 for the police department.
Mr. Shannon.
Thank you. All right, we are amending this or changing this. The police department is only going to purchase 8, and the dollar amount is going to change to $17,261. So I will move to approve the purchase of 8 of the AEDs from Physio Control for $17,261.
Second.
Second by Mr. Modry. Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to check, Captain, are you saying, or is somebody, I'm just not sure where this is coming from.
Yes, this comes from us. We only needed 8 of them. There were, we had more in service than we realized, so we only need 8 of them, so it affected the total price as well. So I turned this information over to Mr. Shannon before the meeting. This is accurate.
I wasn't aware. I appreciate both of you coordinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Item F is the approval of the agreements with the Nebraska Department of Transportation to receive an 80% price reduction on 2 vehicles that have been previously budgeted for and approved by the City Council.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you.
Best Buy of the Nut?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion we approve the agreements with the Nebraska Department of Transportation to receive an 80% price reduction on 2 vehicles that had been previously budgeted for and approved by council.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Discussion, questions? See none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. Item number 13, Administrator's Report. Comments must be limited to the items on the report. Are there any questions for Mr. Mangiamelli? See none, we'll move on to item number 14, public request to be heard. Is there anyone left? Any members of the public addressing the council shall abide by council policy resolution number 35 regarding the principles of conduct and decorum, which states any statement made during city council meetings by the mayor, members of the city council, city officials and employees, or members of the general public shall not involve personal, impertinent, or slanderous attacks on individuals, regardless whether the individual so attacked is elected official, city official, employee, or member of the general public, and City Code 2-68 regarding the manners of addressing the council. Copies of the aforementioned rules are posted outside the council chambers. Speakers shall limit their presentation to 5 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to speak at this time?
Steve Draper, I've signed in previously. I just want to talk a little bit about where we're going to go in the future as a city. My understanding is that currently as a city, we only have 5 cents left on the mill levy till we hit the statutory maximum as a city. So even if, starting today, we added that 5 cents mill levy, that would only be an additional $1.5 million in annual revenue to the city. Additionally, as a city, we are landlocked bound as far as how big we can grow. We can't grow any in the west because of Papillion, and we're limited in our southern growth. So eventually this city is going to have developed all of the land it can develop. And there will not be any further growth for this city. At that point in time, we will have to live on whatever revenue there is at that time. There will not be further opportunity for growth through new building, only through efficiencies. And so I'm encouraging this council to start taking some longer term views 10 years down the road. Now, we don't know when that day is going to come, but it will come. And so one of the big expenditures, y'all know now that we have a paid fire department, is, and I don't think you've even delved into or understand what the costs are going to be for retirement system for the city. For that piece alone, for the fire department, could really be devastating for this city. So currently you're all living under the illusion that we can continue the current level of services to this city indefinitely. And I think you need to change your mode of thinking in that regard, because I just don't think that's reality. Thank you.
Are there others? See none, I'll close the public request to be heard. Item number 15, do we have a closed session?
I don't see anybody out there, so I don't know that there's a reason to have closed session.
I haven't heard a word.
So we'll move on to item number 16, adjournment.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Burns. Questions? Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you.